Look, running a frontier town in winter is basically like juggling flaming swords while riding a horse backwards, except the swords are supply chains, and the horse is 7,000 hungry people who need feeding yesterday. The church folks rolled into town today, and I had the whole thing choreographed like a masterpiece. Instead of dragging them straight to my office and boring them with charts and speeches, I let them take the scenic route. Past the greenhouses, past the hospital. Let their eyeballs do the convincing for me. One nun nearly fell off her cart when she spotted tomatoes growing in the middle of winter. Tomatoes. These city people think winter food means chewing on pickled cabbage and stale bread, so watching their brains short-circuit was genuinely the highlight of my week. Then my assistant Sylvie, sharp as a freshly forged blade, that one, told me they bumped into Cecilia at the hospital. Perfect. Nothing screams, "We're nice to the church," louder than their own former colleague living her best life here and offering everyone tea. I couldn't have scripted it better if I tried. Actually, I did script it, but nobody needs to know that. Meanwhile, my real headache is 3 new territories up north that eat resources like a dragon eats sheep. My people keep shipping grain out there, but that's like trying to fill a bathtub with a teaspoon. They want seeds and greenhouses, and honestly, same, but my own greenhouses are barely keeping up as it is. The answer is down south. Warmer lands, year-round harvests, and merchants who'll sell their grandmother for the right price. My plan? Send them kerosene lamps and steel tools first. Get those southern nobles addicted to stuff they can't make themselves. Once a man gets used to a good iron skillet, he's not going back to his rusty old pan. That's not trade strategy. That's just human nature with a receipt attached. The money looks great on paper, 70,000 silver coins rolling in daily. But coins don't magically turn into bread and bricks. Factories are smoking around the clock and still can't keep pace. Everything needs to move faster, but me? I need to look calm. The guy steering the ship can't be seen sweating, even when the ocean's on fire. As for those church visitors, I told Sylvie we'll meet them tomorrow. Tonight they can lie awake in their beds, replaying everything they saw, slowly realizing this frozen little town is something they never expected. By morning, they'll be halfway to convinced before I even open my mouth. That's the trick. Let people sell themselves on you before you say a single word. My master plan worked like a charm. That old priest didn't sleep a wink last night. I could practically see the dark circles under his eyes when he showed up this morning. Good. That means his brain spent all night replaying the tomato greenhouses, the clock tower, and Cecilia being treated like a rock star. Nothing sells a town better than insomnia caused by sheer disbelief. Morning rolled around, and the sun actually decided to cooperate for once, which almost never happens up here. The whole town looked like it was dipped in gold. Couldn't have ordered better lighting if I'd bribed the weather gods personally. I sent my liaison guy Alan to fetch the priest and his nuns, and of course I had them walk the long way through town again. Call me petty, but round 2 of "watch their jaws hit the floor" is even more fun than round 1. Apparently, one of the nuns started drooling outside the bakery. Literal drooling. Overbread. These people have been eating church crackers for way too long. Then they spotted a little girl refilling a street lamp with kerosene, just casually maintaining public infrastructure like it was no bigger deal than feeding a cat. Alan explained that every household looks after their own lamp, and you could practically hear the nun's worldview cracking in half. Back in the capital, they pay taxes for street lights that nobody bothers to maintain, and half the city is pitch black at night. Here, a 7-year-old handles it before breakfast. When they finally walked into my meeting room, I made sure the sunlight was hitting me at the perfect angle. Not on purpose. Okay, completely on purpose. First impressions matter, and looking like a mysterious young merchant bathed in golden light never hurts when you're negotiating with religious people. The priest did his whole formal blessing routine, which I accepted with a smile that I'd been practicing in the mirror, warm enough to seem genuine, cool enough to seem important. It's a fine line. Then I got straight to business. Pulled out the map, showed them the plot I'd picked for their cathedral. Prime real estate, right off the main street, 35,000 square feet. The priest's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. He knew exactly how good that location was, even after being here just one day. But here's where I dropped the real curveball. I told them they'd be building it themselves. Priests, nuns, the whole crew. Hauling stones, mixing mortar, the works. I gave them my best inspirational speech about how you only truly call a place home when you've gotten dirt under your fingernails building it. Threw in a line about how prayers from a pulpit you built with your own hands carry more weight than ones delivered from a fancy imported altar. Was it a bit manipulative? Maybe. Was it also completely true? Absolutely. Nothing bonds a person to a place like backbreaking labor and blisters. By the time that cathedral goes up, these church folks won't just be visitors stationed in my territory. They'll be locals who happen to wear robes. The priest stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to figure out if I was a genius or a lunatic. Then he nodded with this serious look on his face and agreed to the whole thing. We shook hands. His grip was firm, mine was firmer, because of course it was. Outside, the clock tower cast a perfect shadow across the square like some kind of dramatic exclamation point. Even the architecture in this town has a flair for theatrics. Wonder where it gets that from. Now, while I was busy playing 4D chess with priests and growing winter tomatoes like some kind of agricultural wizard, my dear older brother Arthur was having. Let's call it a different kind of year. Picture this. The golden boy of the Bauhinia family. The guy who once made every noblewoman in the capital swoon just by flipping his perfect curly hair, riding into the imperial city looking like a scarecrow that lost a fight with a mudslide. His fancy golden locks, matted straw. His ivory skin, beef jerky. The man left home 2 years ago with 1,000 elite soldiers and enough money to buy a small country. And he came back with 30 limping guys and a mule pulling a cart held together by prayers and mismatched tarp. And mother was right there with him, sitting in that sad little wagon, still trying to hand him bread like he was 5 years old and late for school. Some things never change. The world could literally be on fire, and that woman would still ask if you've eaten. Here's what went wrong. And honestly, it's the kind of disaster you could see coming from 3 kingdoms away. Arthur marched south to fight beastmen, expecting glory and medals. Instead, he got enemies that respawn like cockroaches. Kill a wave. Here comes another, and another, forever. But the real backstabbing came from home. After father picked the wrong side in some political mess and got crushed, Arthur's supply lines turned into a comedy of horrors. 3,000 spears that shattered on first contact because someone stuffed the iron with garbage. Shields made of rotten wood. Arrows short by a third. Military rations mixed with actual sand. Someone back in the capital was systematically trying to get my brother killed without getting their own hands dirty, and they nearly succeeded. The Golden Lion Duke and his cronies. Classy bunch, really. Nothing says political sophistication like feeding sand to soldiers. Arthur lost almost everyone. 1,000 men whittled down to 30-something broken survivors limping home with empty eyes. But my brother, stubborn as a mule with a personal grudge, kept his spine straight on that skinny horse. He's got a list hidden against his chest. Every sabotaged shipment, every rigged weapon, every bag of sandy grain, documented like a man possessed. He thinks if he can just get an audience with the emperor and slap that evidence on the table, everything flips back in his favor. Bless his heart. I genuinely hope it works out for him. He's my brother. But betting your entire comeback on the emperor's sense of justice is like betting your life savings on a 3-legged horse. Technically possible, but the odds are not what you'd call encouraging. Meanwhile, here I am in my cozy office, sipping red tea, growing tomatoes in winter, and convincing priests to do manual labor. Funny how the family's throwaway son, banished to the frozen north, ended up with 70,000 people, a booming economy, and all his fingers still attached, while the golden heir came home looking like he crawled out of a dumpster. Life has a sense of humor. A dark, twisted, absolutely hilarious sense of humor. Right. So remember how I said betting on the emperor's justice was like betting on a 3-legged horse? Yeah. The horse didn't just lose. It tripped, broke its remaining legs, and fell into a ditch. My brother Arthur rode up to the capital's south gate like a war hero returning from battle. Except he looked less triumphant general and more homeless man who got into a fight with a raccoon and lost. Merchants in line were literally covering their noses. That's the kind of entrance that makes the family ancestors spin in their graves so fast you could hook them up to a windmill. But Arthur, bless his stubborn soul, pulled out the Bauhinia family badge, this big silver brooch with our flower crest, and held it up like it was a golden ticket to a chocolate factory. Announced himself with the whole title, the full noble voice, the works. I am Viscount Arthur Bauhinia, returned from the front lines, requesting an audience with His Majesty. Dramatic. Dignified. Completely pointless. The guards told him to wait. Half an hour later, instead of a welcome committee, out marched 100 Imperial Guardsmen in shiny armor, forming a neat little circle of pointy weapons around my brother and his 30 exhausted guys. Not exactly the red carpet treatment he was hoping for. Then some officer pulled out a scroll and started reading it like a restaurant menu. And what a menu it was. Repeated military failures, disgrace to the Empire, unauthorized desertion from the battlefield. Every line was basically another nail in Arthur's coffin. They stripped him of his rank, his title, his property, everything. Then came the grand finale, treason charges. For him and Mother. Treason. The man who got fed sand-flavored rations and fought beastmen with broken sticks is the traitor. Not the people who deliberately sabotaged his weapons. Not the Golden Lion Duke who turned his supply chain into a murder plot. Nope, Arthur's the criminal here. Makes perfect sense if you have absolutely zero sense. Arthur tried to speak up. Tried to tell them about the sabotage, the evidence he'd been carrying against his chest like a sacred relic for months. Nobody cared. The officer just kept repeating, "Hand over your weapon," like a broken music box with one terrifying song. And there it was. The moment my brother looked at his 30 shaking, broken soldiers, looked at the 100 gleaming spears pointed at his face, and realized that his list of evidence, his righteous anger, his noble bloodline, none of it mattered. Not here. Not anymore. The game was rigged before he even sat down at the table. His sword hit the ground with a sound that probably echoed across the entire city square. Clang. Done. The great Arthur Bauhinia, pride of the family, golden child, the one everyone said would restore our name to glory, disarmed, arrested, and branded a traitor before he even made it past the front door. Now, I wasn't there to see any of this personally. I was up north, probably arguing with a carpenter about greenhouse measurements or something equally exciting. But news travels, and when I eventually heard what happened, I won't lie. Part of me felt sick to my stomach. That's my brother. My mother. Whatever complicated feelings exist between us, nobody deserves to get chewed up and spit out like that by people who were supposed to be on their side. The other part of me, though, the part that's been running a frozen frontier town and learning exactly how this empire actually works, that part just thought, of course, when you play the Capital's game by the Capital's rules, the Capital always wins. The house doesn't just have an edge. The house built the table, stacked the deck, and hired the dealer. Good thing I'm building my own table. So while I was up north debating greenhouse blueprints and sweet-talking priests into construction work, my family was speed-running the worst week in Bauhinia history like they were going for a world record. Arthur got tossed into a dungeon. Not a nice dungeon either. We're talking 3 floors underground, 0 sunlight, walls sweating like a nervous accountant, and the kind of smell that makes sewer rats file complaints. They chained his wrists and threw him in a corner like yesterday's laundry. The guards handled him with all the gentleness of someone stuffing a turkey. And that precious evidence list he'd been guarding with his life, the one he slept with, bled on, and probably whispered goodnight to, gone. Confiscated in about 4 seconds during the pat-down. 3 months of meticulous record-keeping vanished into some bureaucrat's pocket faster than a coin in a magician's act. I'd feel sorry for him if it wasn't so painfully predictable. Bringing your only evidence to the people who are framing you is like handing your house keys to the burglar and saying, "Please lock up when you're done." Mother was in the cell. Next door, cycling through every stage of grief at triple speed, screaming, cursing, threatening, and finally dissolving into the kind of crying that sounds like a squeaky door hinge in a haunted house. The guards told her they'd gag her if she didn't pipe down. Classy establishment, that imperial dungeon. Then came the real punchline. Mother started screaming for Serena. "Get my daughter. Serena will save us." Because apparently the family plan B was my sister, who'd been doing well for herself in the capital with her Nightingale trading company. Except, whoops, Serena had already packed up every last coin from the company and bolted. 2 weeks ago. Destination? My place. The frozen wasteland everybody thought was my punishment. The useless Lorien's garbage dump, up north. She ran straight to me. I wish I could have seen Arthur's face when the officer delivered that news with all the emotional warmth of someone reading ingredients off a cereal box. My sister, the sharp one, the one who actually understands which way the wind blows. She looked at the entire imperial chessboard, calculated every possible move, and decided the safest square on the map was standing right behind her supposedly worthless little brother. Arthur sat there in the dark, trying to process it. The brother he called trash now runs a territory powerful enough that their street-smart sister chose it as her escape hatch. Meanwhile he, the heir, the champion, the family's great hope, is chained to a wall in a basement, stripped of everything, with nothing left but wet stones and regret. I can picture him doing the math in his head and absolutely hating the answer. Wait, if Serena thinks Lorien can protect her from the entire empire, then Lorien is. No. No, no, no. Yes, brother. Yes, yes, yes. Look, I'm not celebrating. Family is family, and watching them get crushed by the same political machine that exiled me doesn't bring me joy. But there's a certain cosmic poetry to it, isn't there? They shipped me north with nothing, no money, no soldiers, no support, basically a polite death sentence wrapped in a ribbon. And now their golden boy sits in chains while the waste of a son is the only Bauhenia still standing with a roof over his head and food on his table. I didn't plan this. I didn't wish for it. But I'd be lying if I said the irony doesn't hit different when you're sipping warm tea in your office while your brother discovers that rock bottom has a basement. While I was busy up north convincing nuns to lay bricks and plotting trade routes over tea, the Golden Lion Duke was in the capital having what I can only describe as the political equivalent of stepping on a rake and then watching it flip up and smack him in the face. Repeatedly. This man, picture a guy wearing 3 gemstone rings simultaneously because apparently one giant, I'm compensating for something, signal, wasn't enough, was sitting in his fancy meeting room, sipping imported wine, patting himself on the back for destroying my family. Arthur arrested? Check. Bauhenia name dragged through the mud? Check. Even my measly barren title got stripped, which honestly is like stealing a hat from a guy who already has 50 better hats. But sure, go off, Your Grace. His grand finale was supposed to be a ban on all my products sold through the Golden Eagle Trading Company. No more kerosene lamps, no more smokeless coal, no more steel tools hitting the capital market. The logic was beautifully stupid. Ban the good stuff, flood the market with his knockoff garbage, and force people to buy his crumbling iron pans because there's nothing else on the shelf. Capitalism at its absolute ugliest. He had the paperwork drafted. He had his pen ready. He was probably rehearsing his villain laugh. And then his butler burst through the door looking like he'd seen a ghost riding a flaming horse. Turns out 1,000 people showed up outside the Trade Alliance headquarters. Farmers, blacksmiths, shopkeepers, even butlers from minor noble houses. All of them waving crooked handwritten signs and screaming about how they wanted their good iron pots and windproof lamps back. The signs were incredible. We want real iron pans, not tin foil that shatters when you look at it. Ban the lamps, and what do we use? Hope. Smokeless coal costs more, but at least we're not coughing to death. Give it back. 1,000 angry people who've tasted quality and refuse to go back to junk. That's not a protest. That's a customer review section come to life and marching down the street with pitchforks. The Duke tried his usual move, send the cops, scatter the peasants. Except the cops took one look at 1,000 furious citizens, with minor nobles standing in the front row like human shields, and said, absolutely not. We don't get paid enough for this, smart cops. Old Golden Lion had to sit in his carriage, peek through the curtain at the chaos, and drive home with his tail between his legs. The ban, quietly shelved. A messenger slipped out the back door of the Trade Alliance with a sealed letter basically saying, yeah, we're not doing that ban thing. Right now, let's maybe think about it some more, which in bureaucrat language means, this is dead and we're pretending it never happened. Meanwhile, Duke Ace, my business partner, and the one noble in the capital with an actual functioning brain, read the news, burned the letter in a candle like a dramatic mastermind, and looked north toward my territory with what I imagine was a very satisfied grin. Here's the beautiful thing nobody in the capital seems to understand yet. You can strip my title, arrest my brother, blacklist my family name, scheme and plot until your rings fall off, but you cannot make people unwant a product that actually works. Every farmer who's used my steel plow isn't going back to a rusty blade that snaps in frozen soil. Every family that's lit their home with a windproof lamp isn't going back to squinting in the dark. I didn't just sell them products. I sold them a standard of living. And that genie doesn't go back in the bottle, no matter how many dukes try to shove it. The funniest part? I didn't organize that protest. I didn't pay anyone. I didn't send a single agent to stir things up. 1,000 people marched on their own because my stuff is just that good. That's not politics. That's the free market throwing a tantrum on my behalf. And it's the most beautiful thing I've never seen in person. The Golden Lion Duke is having what medical professionals would call a very bad time, and I am enjoying every second of it from my cozy northern office. Here's the situation. Duke Ace, my secret business partner and the only aristocrat in the capital who plays chess while everyone else plays checkers, just pulled the most beautiful move. He invited 3 of the most powerful people in the trade alliance on a little field trip up north. Not to my town directly. Oh no, that would be too obvious. He's taking them to the territories I recently absorbed, Oakhaven and White River, to show them where the products really come from. It's genius. See, the Golden Lion Duke has been trying to ban my goods by tying them to the disgraced Bohemian name. But if 3 heavyweight trade officials personally witness factories and territories with clean, legitimate noble titles pumping out kerosene lamps and steel tools, game over. You can't ban products from respectable baronies just because you're mad about losing market share. Let me introduce the guests on this little tour. First, there's Justin Hall, Vice Chairman of the Trade Alliance, a man who's been swimming with business sharks for 40 years and has more connections than a spider's web. Then Beatrice Clare, the woman whose signature on a trade license is worth more than the Emperor's seal in certain circles. And finally Old Crawford, head of the Ironworkers Guild, who basically decides what counts as quality metal in the entire empire. These 3 together could rewrite the commercial rulebook over lunch. The Duke nearly crushed his wine glass when he heard. Poor man's been stress drinking so much expensive southern wine that his blood is probably 50% grape at this point. But wait, it gets better. The church decided to chime in too. Some bishops sent a quiet little message to the Trade Alliance that basically said, Lorien donated the money for our new cathedral, and we think he's a swell guy who deserves respect. 2 sentences. No names dropped. No direct mention of any trade ban. Just a gentle nudge that carried the weight of the entire religious establishment. That was my cathedral play paying off. Remember when I gave the priest prime real estate and made his team build the church with their own hands? That wasn't just team-building exercise. That was me buying the most expensive insurance policy in the empire. The kind that comes with holy backing and makes politicians think twice before messing with you. The Duke smashed a teacup. I heard he screamed something about that old holy fraud, which is a hilarious way to describe a bishop when you think about it. Meanwhile, his knockoff products are falling apart like wet cardboard. His copied kerosene lamps clog up after a few days. His imitation smokeless coal smells like someone set fire to a garbage pile. His bootleg steel tools go dull in 2 weeks. The man is basically running a counterfeit operation where even the counterfeits are embarrassed to exist. Without my products banned from the market, his junk sits on shelves collecting dust while customers walk straight past them to buy the real thing. His alchemist asked for 3 more weeks to fix the quality issues, and the Duke laughed in his face. 3 weeks from now, those trade officials will have already toured the northern factories, come home, and told the entire alliance that everything is legitimate. At that point, trying to push through a ban would be like trying to stop a river with a napkin. He sent spies to follow the trade delegation. Of course. Watch, but don't touch. Because even he knows that attacking 3 of the most important commercial figures in the empire would be signing his own death warrant. Right now, those 3 VIPs are rolling through the northern roads in custom oak carriages with shock-absorbing wheels, probably arguing about whether my factories are real. Justin thinks it's suspicious that nobody's heard of these territories having industry before. Beatrice is cautiously curious. Old Crawford is napping, because at his age, you save your energy for things that actually matter. They'll arrive in 2 days. And when they see what I've built, when they walk through real workshops producing real products that their own hands can test, every piece of paper the Golden Lion Duke has drafted becomes kindling. The funniest part of this whole chess match is that I'm not even at the board right now. Duke Ace is moving the pieces in the capital. The church is providing cover fire. 1,000 angry citizens are protesting in the streets on my behalf. and 3 trade officials are voluntarily driving 2 days through frozen countryside to verify my legitimacy. All I had to do was make stuff that doesn't break. Turns out that's revolutionary enough to topple a duke. Allow me to describe the most satisfying thing that happened this week, and I wasn't even there for it. That's how good my setup is. Victory delivers itself while I'm drinking tea. Duke Ace rolled up to Oakhaven with his 3 VIP guests, and what they found made their brains do a full factory reset. Picture 3 of the most powerful trade officials in the empire stepping out of their fancy carriages into mud, looking up and seeing row after row of red brick buildings with smokestacks puffing away like an industrial symphony. These people came expecting maybe a shed with a guy and a hammer. Instead, they got an entire manufacturing district. Old Crawford, the metalwork guild boss who's been judging iron quality since before most people were born, picked up one of my freshly forged hoes and practically fell in love with it. Started stroking the blade edge like it was a newborn kitten, weighing it in his hands, muttering about how the steel quality was better than anything on the capital market. He asked what was mixed into the metal. Ace just smiled and offered to show him months of production records, which is rich person code for, "Wouldn't you like to know, old man?" Beatrice wandered off on her own and found the lamp assembly room. Every single part of those windproof kerosene lamps, cast, shaped, and assembled right there on site. She gave Ace this look like, "Are you kidding me right now?" And he just shrugged with the casual energy of a man holding 4 aces in a poker game, which is fitting, given his name. Then came the question everyone was really there to ask. Justin, the vice chairman, looked Ace dead in the eyes and said, "Be honest, these aren't actually made in Greywood Town, are they?" Beautiful question. And Ace answered it beautifully. Took them to White River the next day, showed them an even bigger operation. Forges, glass furnaces, the whole package. Every workshop had production logs, shipping receipts, purchase orders for raw materials, paperwork so clean you could eat dinner off it. Then he casually mentioned that Greywood Town was developing nicely, but probably couldn't handle industrial production at this scale. Just a young territory, nothing to see there. The man deserves an award for acting. Here's what actually happened. Obviously, I built all that. My engineers designed the processes, my workers trained the crews, my resources kick-started the operations. But on paper, those factories belong to Oakhaven and White River, territories with proper noble titles and zero connection to the scandalous Bohemia name. It's like cooking dinner at your house, but serving it at your neighbor's table so the health inspector doesn't bother you. 3 days of touring later, those trade officials went home and did exactly what we needed. The Trade Alliance passed an official resolution declaring that kerosene lamps, smokeless coal, and steel tools have completely legitimate origins and can be sold freely in the capital. No individual or organization can interfere with monopoly nonsense. Every single product cleared. The Golden Lion Duke reportedly turned a color that hasn't been invented yet. Somewhere between eggplant purple and cardiac event red. He spent weeks drafting his ban, pulling strings, bribing officials, and scheming his little gemstone ring-wearing heart out. And now 3 people he can't bully, can't bribe, and can't threaten just stamped, approved, on everything he wanted destroyed. My products are now legally untouchable in the capital market. His knockoff garbage still falls apart in 2 weeks. And every day my factories keep running, my brand gets stronger while his reputation gets weaker. Checkmate doesn't even cover it. This is more like flipping the entire chessboard, setting it on fire, and then calmly asking your opponent if he'd like to play another round. My sister Serena finally showed up at my office, and let me tell you, watching her try to reconcile useless gambling addict little brother with guy who runs an industrial empire was better entertainment than anything money can buy. She sat across from me looking like someone who'd just been told the sky is actually green and then walked outside to confirm it. 2 years ago, this woman used to barge into my room to yell at me about casino debts. Now she's sitting in MY office, drinking MY tea, in MY territory, because she fled here for protection. The universe has a comedy writer, and that person deserves a raise. She hit me with the obvious question first. You built those factories in Oakhaven and White River just to fool the Trade Alliance inspectors? I poured her some tea, slowly, because dramatic timing matters, and said, partly. Then I explained the actual strategy, which is way More interesting than just tricking some bureaucrats. Those territories have iron deposits, limestone, fireproof clay, stuff my own mines don't produce. Building factories next to the raw materials instead of hauling everything back to Greywood saves enough money to make an accountant weep with joy. Plus, keeping all production in one town is like putting every egg in one basket and then juggling that basket over a cliff. Spread things out, and if disaster hits one location, the others keep running. Serena's face went through this incredible journey while I talked. She's a businesswoman, spent years reading people's micro-expressions for a living, and I could see her brain screaming, "This makes too much." Since T.O. be coming from the guy who once lost his pants in a card game. Then she asked how many troops I have. 7,000 Iron Guard, I told her. 1,500 still in training, but the rest are combat ready. Her eyes did a little calculation dance. That's roughly the same size as the garrison defending the imperial capital's outer perimeter. From a frozen backwater territory that was supposed to be my grave. Oops. She got clever and asked, "It's not just 7,000, is it?" Because she'd seen my half-orc workers on the way in. Those guys are nearly 2 meters tall, built like walking siege engines, casually carrying iron pipes and boulders around like they're grocery bags. If I strapped armor on them, I waved that off. They're workers, not soldiers. But then I asked her a question that shut the whole conversation down. If someone tried to destroy the place you call home, wouldn't you bite them? She went quiet. Because she'd already seen the answer walking through town. My people don't just live here, they belong here. They've got warm brick houses, fresh bread, street lamps they maintain themselves, jobs that pay, kids in schools. In the capital, people shrug when governments change because nothing ever gets better for them anyway. Here, every single person has something worth fighting for. Try invading a town where 70,000 people would rather die than give it up. I dare you. Then I laid out why nobody's actually coming. The Empire's main army is pinned down fighting beastmen in the south. Thanks, Arthur, for confirming that front is a meat grinder. The Emperor and the Senate have zero interest in sending troops to deal with some guy in the north who won't give back his land after we took his title. I'm basically a squatter they can't be bothered to evict because the house is on fire somewhere else. The Golden Lion. Duke? He could maybe scrape together a few thousand soldiers, rope in some northern nobles who haven't joined my side yet, and assemble maybe 10,000 guys total. Against my 7,000 well-equipped, well-fed, highly motivated troops defending home turf with superior weapons. I asked Serena who she thought would win that fight. She didn't answer, which I asked the answer. I watched the realization dawn on her face like sunrise over a glacier. She came here thinking she was fleeing to her loser brother's hideout as a last resort. Now she's realizing she accidentally landed in the most strategically secure position on the entire continent. The Golden Lion Duke's big scary moves, banning my products, stripping my title, arresting my family, they're all punches landing on a pillow. I'm not even playing the same game as him anymore. He's fighting over market share in one city. I'm rearranging the economic geography of the northern half of the empire. The best part? I didn't have to convince Serena of any of this. She's smart enough to see it herself. All I had to do was pour tea and state facts. The facts do the convincing. The tea is just good hospitality. Serena spent a solid 5 minutes staring at my face like she was trying to find the hidden zipper where the real Lorian is hiding inside this costume. She even asked if I'd eaten some kind of magic pill or gotten possessed by a demon. Fair question, honestly. If I saw my old self, transformed from guy who once bet his shoes in a card game and walked home barefoot, to industrial overlord of the North, I'd suspect demonic involvement too. Obviously, I can't tell her the truth. Hey sis, I'm actually a soul from another world with a cheat system that prints money based on population count. Yeah, that conversation would go great. She'd have me committed to my own hospital. Then she got all impressed about something darker. The fact that the Golden Lion Duke sent multiple spy teams to investigate my territory, and none of them ever reported back. She looked at me with this sharp gaze and asked if I'd handled everyone who could leak my secrets. I just raised an eyebrow and said, "What if I did?" She didn't flinch. Actually smiled. Said I was more ruthless than she expected, and she meant it as a compliment. That's my family for you. We show affection through mutual appreciation of each other's capacity for strategic violence. Then Serena pitched her big plan. rebuild the Nightingale Trading Company immediately, blast open the southern trade routes, start shipping my products to the southern kingdoms where nobles are sitting on mountains of gold with nothing decent to buy. She was practically vibrating with excitement about the profit margins. And I said no. Well, not yet. You should have seen her face. It was the expression of a racehorse being told to sit down at the starting line. She launched into this whole speech about how the southern market is enormous. The profits would be triple what we make in the capital. The nobles down there are desperate for quality goods. Yeah, I know all that. I probably knew it before she did. But here's the thing about timing. It's everything. I walked over to my giant wall map, which I'm starting to think is my favorite prop in this office because every important conversation ends with me pointing at it dramatically. I traced a line from our cathedral construction site, through the capital, all the way down to the southern kingdoms. The cathedral, that beautiful, brilliant cathedral I'm having the church people build with their own hands. News about it is already spreading through church networks faster than gossip at a royal wedding. Bishop Macbeth, my inside guy at the church, has been whispering about it through every religious channel he has access to. And church whisper networks make the postal service look like carrier pigeons with broken wings. When word reaches the southern kingdoms that some northern territory is building a grand cathedral of holy light, every devout noble down there is going to perk up like a dog hearing a treat bag open. And when our trade caravan eventually shows up at their gates, we won't be random merchants from some frozen nowhere. We'll be the trading company from the territory building the great cathedral. That's not a business card. That's a VIP pass to every noble court south of the mountains. Serena opened her mouth to argue, realized she couldn't, and closed it again. She's been doing business her whole life, and she knows that showing up with a legitimate, church-endorsed reputation is worth more than any amount of advertising budget. In the South, where people take religion seriously enough to name their kids after saints, being connected to a cathedral project is basically a cheat code for trust. I told her to relax, settle into the nice house I prepared for her, learn how Greywood works from the inside, and wait for the right moment. She agreed, which might be the first time in recorded history that Serena Balhinia has let someone else call the shots. Between the cathedral, the church endorsement, the trade officials clearing my products, and now my business-savvy sister joining the team, every single piece is sliding into position like clockwork. I'm not rushing because I don't need to. Rushing is what people do when they're scared. I'm not scared. I'm just letting the board set itself up so that when I finally make my move, it won't even look like a move. It'll look like an inevitability. Also, she's going to lose her mind when she sees how the greenhouses work. I'm giving it 3 days before she comes storming back into my office demanding to know how winter tomatoes are possible. I should start a betting pool. Just when Serena thought she'd maxed out her things that blow my mind about my little brother meter for the day, I pulled a little wooden box out of my desk drawer and cranked that meter straight through the ceiling. She was literally getting up to leave. Perfect timing. Every good salesman knows. You save the killer product for when the customer thinks the meeting is over. I popped open the box, and inside was my newest baby, a navigation compass. Not those clunky floating rock-in-a-bucket things that sailors currently use, which are about as accurate as throwing a shoe in the air and seeing where it lands. This one fits in 2 palms, has a brass casing polished smoother than a diplomat's lies, a glass cover over the internal mechanism, a precision dial with degree markings, and a needle so sensitive it could detect a magnetic field from the next continent. Serena stared at it like I'd just pulled a live dragon out of my desk. What is this? Navigation compass, I said, in the same tone you'd used to say, it's Tuesday. Her brain immediately went into merchant mode. I could practically see the calculator behind her eyes spinning so fast it caught fire. A compact, storm-proof compass that actually works in rough seas means shorter routes, fewer shipwrecks, less dead sailors. For ship captains who sail long distances, this thing is worth its weight in. No, more than its weight in gold. They'd sell a kidney for one of these. Both kidneys. Someone else's kidneys too. Can it be copied? She asked, because she's a businesswoman and that's always the first question. I leaned back with the kind of casual confidence that comes from already knowing the answer. The magnetic treatment process that makes the whole thing work? 3 people in my entire town know it. You could take this compass apart, study every piece under a magnifying glass, and all you'd end up with is a very pretty paperweight. Without the secret sauce, the needle just sits there like a confused tourist. First batch, under 100 units. Enough to create demand without flooding the market. I told her the plan. Wait until the cathedral news spreads through the southern kingdoms. Then send these compasses as the first shipment through the Nightingale Trading Company. Show up at southern port cities not as random northern merchants, but as the cathedral builders who also happen to sell the most advanced navigation tool on the planet. Every ship captain in every harbor is going to fight over these like seagulls over a French fry. Serena stood there processing for what felt like a geological age. This woman has spent years in the imperial capital's business world. She's seen trends rise and crash, fortunes made and lost, products come and go. But she's never seen someone sitting on a stack of revolutionary inventions, each one capable of disrupting an entire industry, casually unveiling them one at a time like it's show and tell at a very exclusive kindergarten. Kerosene lamps? Game changer. Smokeless coal? Industry disruptor. Steel tools? Market dominator. And now a precision compass that makes ocean travel actually safe? That's not a product. That's a civilization upgrade. She finally looked me in the eye and said the 5 sweetest words a formerly dismissive older sibling can say. I underestimated you. I stood up and offered her a handshake. Welcome to Greywood Town, dear sister. She grabbed my hand, and I could feel the exact moment she registered that this wasn't the same clammy, trembling grip of the drunk kid who used to reach out begging for gambling money. This was firm, warm. The handshake of someone who knows exactly what he's doing and has about 14 more surprises tucked in various desk drawers. The old Lorian's hand said, "Please give me money. I owe a scary man at the casino." My hand says, "I'm about to corner the maritime navigation market, and there's nothing anyone can do about it." Quite the upgrade, if I do say so myself. The second Serena's footsteps faded down the hallway, I dropped the cool guy act and opened the window to let the cold air slap some reality back into my face. Here's a secret about being a leader. Half the job is looking calm while your brain runs 1,000 worst-case scenarios simultaneously. In front of Serena, I made everything sound like a stroll through a garden. Golden Lion Duke? Uft. Northern nobles? Please. Imperial threats? Yawn. But behind closed doors? Every single one of those problems gets its own file, its own analysis, and its own, what if everything goes horribly wrong, contingency plan. Strategic arrogance is fine. Tactical arrogance gets you killed. I plan to die old, fat, and surrounded by excellent tea. Sylvie came in from the side room where she'd been eavesdropping on my entire conversation with Serena, which I obviously knew about because I'm the one who told her to listen in the first place. She reported that Serena's new house was ready, complete with hidden guards stationed around the block. Nobody touches my sister. She's too valuable. Also, she's family, I guess. That too. Then we got to the real business. The map on my wall, and those 7 remaining noble territories I haven't absorbed yet. 2 viscounties and 5 baronies, scattered across the mountains and hills like crumbs someone forgot to sweep up. Combined population? About 130,000. Combined military? A pathetic 2,300 soldiers with rusty swords and the combat readiness of a retirement home. Sylvie, bless her aggressive little heart, immediately suggested we just steamroll them. Send in the Iron Guard, kick down some doors, game over by lunch. And honestly, I love her enthusiasm. But she's thinking like a hammer, and I need to think like a lockpick. Here's what she missed. Cornered animals bite hardest. Right now those lords have 2,300 professional soldiers. Pathetic. But the moment my army shows up outside their walls, every lord in every castle will panic draft every farmhand, servant, and one-legged beggar they can find, shove a pointy stick in their hands, and throw them on the walls. Suddenly 2,300 becomes 5,000 or 6,000 desperate idiots willing to dump boiling oil on my troops, because the alternative is losing everything. Could my Iron Guard win? Obviously. 7,000 well-trained soldiers with steel armor, cannons, and repeating crossbows versus a mob of terrified farmers holding garden tools? The math is embarrassingly one-sided. But siege warfare is a meat grinder no matter how lopsided the odds are. Some lunatic on a wall with a rock can still kill a fully armored elite soldier if the rock lands right. And every soldier I lose is a catastrophe on multiple levels. First, each one cost me a fortune in training, equipment, and white bread. Second, I have to pay their family a fat pension. And third, and this is the part only I know about, every living person in my territory generates 1 silver coin per day through my system. Dead people generate 0 coins per day. Forever. That's not a casualty. That's a permanent revenue cut. Losing soldiers in a pointless siege is like setting money on fire while also setting the money printer on fire. It's losing twice. I refuse. The smart play is to break these territories apart before the Golden Lion Duke can glue them together into one big, annoying coalition. Pick them off one by one, not with swords, but with something much more devastating. Economics. These territories are already falling apart. Their people are cold, hungry, and miserable. Their lords can barely pay their guards. One harsh winter, which, hello, this is the North. Every winter is harsh, and they'll be begging for help. And who happens to have warm houses, full bellies, functioning hospitals, and an economy that actually works? This handsome guy right here. I told Sylvie to bring me the economic warfare files. She marched off with the energy of someone who just got told Christmas is coming early. The best weapon against a crumbling wall isn't a battering ram. It's patience. You just wait for the cracks to do the work for you, then walk through the gap without breaking a sweat. Or, in my case, you make the cracks bigger by selling their neighbors bread so delicious that their own citizens start asking why they can't have nice things. War is expensive. Economics is free. Well, not free, but the return on investment is spectacular and nobody has to mop up blood afterward. Let me tell you about my favorite hobby, destroying people's entire economic systems without ever picking up a sword. Some guys collect stamps. I collect collapsing feudal economies. Sylvie dropped the Northern Trade Infiltration Assessment file on my desk, and honestly, reading it felt like opening a report card where every grade is A. We've been running this operation for months now, and those 7 pathetic noble territories are falling apart like wet cake. Phase 1 was salt. Beautiful, clean, refined salt. Those territories produce this disgusting, gritty stuff that tastes like someone seasoned it with beach sand. I flooded their markets with my purified salt at 20% cheaper than their own garbage product. Once a peasant tastes salt that doesn't make them want to cry, they're never going back. It's like showing someone indoor plumbing and then asking them to use a hole in the ground again. Not happening. Then came the iron pots, the textiles, the steel tools. Each one a little torpedo aimed at their local businesses. But my absolute masterpiece? Booze. I had my distillers cook up a high-proof liquor from surplus wheat and potatoes. Strong, smooth, and warm enough to make a frozen northerner feel like they're vacationing on a tropical beach. I priced it so cheap that buying it was basically stealing. The result? Every single tavern in the Winter Viscount's territory shut down last month. Every one. Their local beer tasted like someone wrung out a dirty sock into a cup and cost twice as much. The Viscount's own soldiers are spending their paychecks on MY booze the second the coins hit their hands. I'm literally getting his army drunk on my dime, and they're thanking me for it. The Yellow Cedar Viscount tried to fight back. Issued a decree banning all products with my star logo. Penalty: death by hanging. Very dramatic. Very scary. Lasted exactly 3 days, until his own military supply officer got caught hoarding 10 barrels of my kerosene in his personal basement. And the guy who ratted him out? The defense captain who was mad he didn't get any. You can't make this stuff up. When your own enforcement officers are your best customers, your ban is less of a law and more of a suggestion that everyone is politely ignoring. Half their economy is already in my pocket, and they don't even realize the other half is next. But wait, there's more. Because crushing their economy is only course 1 of this meal. Course 2 is draining every mercenary and hired sword from their territories. I posted job listings across Oakhaven, White River, and Red Leaf. Easy gigs like escort a mineral cart, or walk along this safe road and look intimidating, or, my personal favorite, shovel snow. 0 danger. Pay double what those 7 territories offer for actually fighting winter wolves. You know, the jobs where you might actually die. Mercenaries are not complicated creatures. They want money, and they want to keep breathing. When the choice is risk getting eaten by wolves for 5 coins versus push a wheelbarrow in total safety for 10 coins, the decision makes itself. 3 months later, every sales word, freelance fighter, and wandering thug has migrated to my territories like birds flying south for winter. Those 7 lords have fewer than 100 mercenaries left between them. 100. I've seen bigger crowds at a bakery opening. Without mercenaries, their emergency draft pool is just farmers who've never held anything sharper than a turnip. Good luck defending your castle walls with that. And now, Course 3. The chef's special. The part Sylvie reported with the kind of crisp military precision that makes me simultaneously proud and slightly terrified of her. The Yellow Cedar Viscount's defense commander? Bribed. Took our gold without hesitation and promised to conveniently fall ill whenever we need him to. The Winter Viscount's 2 toughest knight captains suffered a tragic accident involving winter wolves and a cliff. Very sad. Totally natural. Nobody saw anything. And their replacements just happened to be regular customers at our casino who owe us enough gambling debts to buy a small house. Bribery, blackmail, assassination disguised as accidents, and strategic debt traps. It's like a recipe, and every ingredient makes the dish more delicious. Those viscounts are terrified. They're making servants taste test their food. They can't sleep at night. They know someone is systematically dismantling their power structure from the inside, but they can't figure out who or how or where the next hit is coming from. It's like being haunted by a ghost that also understands economics. And the beautiful thing is, these guys were already losers. They got exiled to the frozen north because they couldn't hack it in the capital. Asking them to outmaneuver my operation is like asking a goldfish to play chess. They don't even know what game we're playing, let alone how to win it. I told Sylvie to let them stew in their fear for a few more days. Once their economies are gutted, their mercenaries are gone, their commanders are bought, and their morale is in the toilet, we walk in and take over without a single drop of blood spilled. Why waste perfectly good soldiers storming a castle when you can just buy the guy holding the keys, bankrupt the guy who owns the castle, and get the castle's own guards too drunk to care? Violence is the tool of people who ran out of better ideas. I have plenty of ideas, and a terrifyingly efficient assistant who arranges cliff accidents with the casual professionalism of someone scheduling a lunch meeting. While I was up north running the world's most successful How to Dismantle Feudal Lords Without Getting Your Hands Dirty operation, the last domino in the Bauhinia family's spectacular collapse finally tipped over. And that domino was my father, Richard Bauhinia, former duke, former power player, former guy who slapped tables at senators and got away with it. Current status, withered husk sitting in a greenhouse, trimming dead flowers in a bathrobe that's seen better decades. 2 years ago, Father made the classic ambitious nobleman mistake. He bet everything on the wrong prince. Backed the eldest son in a power grab. The third prince won instead. Oops. On the night everything fell apart, Father actually poured himself a cup of poison, ready to exit stage left with dignity. But the new emperor had other plans. Smashed the poison, confiscated almost everything, kicked Serena out of high society, shipped me to the frozen north like expired cargo. And then, here's the cruel genius part. Let Father live. Not out of mercy. Oh no. The emperor wanted him to watch. Wanted him sitting in that decaying mansion, surrounded by guards who were really jailers. Pruning dead flowers day after day, slowly watching his legacy rot from the inside out like fruit left in the sun. Even left Arthur commanding troops on the southern front, which looked like a second chance, but was actually just a longer runway for the crash landing. The emperor even let Arthur keep his command of 6,000 soldiers. Generous, right? Except the Golden Lion Duke was quietly replacing his spear tips with tissue paper and mixing sand into his rations. The second chance was a murder plot wearing a ribbon. The emperor knew. He probably picked out the ribbon himself. Father understood all of this, eventually. But understanding a trap and escaping it are two very different things. He spent 2 years clinging to one thread of hope. Arthur winning even a tiny victory down south. Just enough to shut the critics up. Just enough to keep the family name alive on life support. Then a servant came running into the greenhouse. No afternoon tea tray. Empty hands. Face white as snow. Shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. The old man didn't even need to hear the words. When your servant looks like he's seen the apocalypse, you already know the news isn't. Arthur won a medal. Arthur annihilated. Army gone. Arrested for treason at the city gates. Mother too. Both rotting in the deepest dungeon the empire has to offer. Father's pruning shears hit the stone floor. That little metallic clang was basically the sound of the Bauhinia family's 200-year legacy hitting the pavement. He didn't scream, didn't cry, just slumped back into his chair and stared at a dead flower pot. And in that silence, he finally saw the whole picture. The Emperor's beautiful, patient, absolutely merciless chess game. Every mercy was calculated suffering. Every opportunity was a trap with a longer fuse. Arthur's command wasn't clemency. It was a ticking clock designed to produce exactly this result. Total military destruction, followed by a treason charge so airtight that the Bauhinia name could never legally recover. Even the Emperor's forgiveness was a weapon, a 2-year countdown disguised as grace. Then Father coughed up blood, a lot of it, collapsed onto the greenhouse floor, and that was pretty much that. The bell that should have tolled 2 years ago finally rang. Now, am I going to sit here and pretend I feel nothing? No, he was my father. The original Lorien's father, anyway, and I carry those memories whether I want to or not. The man was ruthless, ambitious, and frankly not great at parenting. He literally whipped his youngest son for being a disappointment and then shipped him to die in the Arctic. Father of the Year material, he was not. But watching a proud man get slowly dismantled by an even more ruthless system, stripped of everything piece by piece until the last thread snaps and takes him with it, there's no joy in that. Just a cold, heavy lesson about what happens when you play the Empire's game and lose. The Emperor didn't kill my father. He just removed every reason my father had to keep living, and then waited. That's not justice. That's gardening. You don't pull out the weed. You just stop watering it and watch it wither. Funny thing is, the only Bauhinia who's thriving right now is the one they threw away. The waste. The disappointment. The kid they figured would drink himself to death in some frozen shack within a year. Surprise, Dad. Your dead flower garden has one bloom left. And it's growing in the place you never bothered to look. So apparently the Emperor himself is now thinking about me. The Emperor. Reynold. The guy who stepped over his own brother's corpse to sit on the throne. The man whose office is decorated with black obsidian floors and a military map the size of a wall because interior design magazines don't publish a terrifying dictator chic edition. Let me paint this picture. A built-like-a-warship monarch in a plain black military uniform, sitting in a room designed to make visitors feel like they're about to be sentenced to death, casually reading reports about how my family is imploding like a sandcastle in a tsunami. Father had a stroke. Full paralysis. Can't even speak anymore. The report landed on the Emperor's desk right next to the one about Arthur and Mother being chained up in a dungeon. 2 documents, 1 family, 0 survivors. And the Emperor's reaction? Nothing. Not a smile, not a frown. Just the emotional warmth of a granite countertop. Here's what I've pieced together about this man's strategy, and honestly, it's so cold-blooded it makes my economic warfare look like a children's tea party. 2 years ago, he didn't kill Father because corpses don't suffer. Instead, he built a slow-motion horror show. Let Father sit alive in a crumbling mansion watching his family disintegrate one piece at a time. Let Arthur keep his command on the southern front, not as mercy, but as a longer leash to hang himself with. Even let the Golden Lion Duke sabotage Arthur's supplies, because why do your own dirty work when your attack dog is eager to bite? 2 years of calculated psychological torture disguised as imperial clemency. This man doesn't play chess. He plays chess while simultaneously playing 3 other games nobody else can see. But here's where it gets interesting for yours truly. The Emperor's spy, some creepy guy in a gray cloak who apparently materializes from walls like a ghost with a government salary, delivered 3 pieces of news about the North. 1. Duke Ace's factory tour killed the Golden Lion Duke's trade ban. Dead. Buried. Flowers on the grave. 2. The church is publicly backing my cathedral project. Holy endorsement achieved. 3. That, stripped of his title, Lorien Bauhinia Kid, he's the puppet master behind all of it. And the Emperor's response was a smile. A cold, amused, genuinely intrigued smile. Not, send the army, a smile. Do you know how terrifying that is? When the most dangerous man on the continent finds you interesting. But here's the part that really makes me nervous and weirdly flattered at the same time. The Emperor isn't actually mad at me. He's mad at the Golden Lion Duke. Turns out his loyal attack dog has been getting a little too ambitious, using the Destroy the Bauhinia Family project as cover. to gobble up every business opportunity in sight, stack the Senate with his people, and basically position himself as the next untouchable power player. The emperor doesn't care if people buy my lamps or someone else's candles. He cares about balance. His entire governing philosophy boils down to one word: counterweight. He let the Golden Lion Duke grow strong to crush the old nobility. But now the Duke is getting too strong, and an emperor who lets one faction dominate is an emperor who's about to have a very bad day. And then he looks at his board and notices something funny. That pawn he flicked into the frozen wasteland 2 years ago, the one he figured would drink itself to death in a snowdrift, it crossed the river. It's blocking pieces. It's causing problems for the Duke without the emperor having to lift a finger. According to my intelligence sources, the emperor actually paused and found our situation similar. Him, overlooked third son with a brilliant older brother, underestimated by everyone, ended up on the throne. Me, overlooked third son with a brilliant older brother, underestimated by everyone, ended up building a northern industrial empire. I'm not sure if being compared to the emperor is a compliment or a death sentence. Possibly both. The last guy who reminded this emperor of himself was his older brother, and that ended with a body on the floor. But right now, at this exact moment, I'm useful. I'm the unexpected counterweight to the Golden Lion Duke's growing power. The emperor doesn't need to support me. He just needs to not crush me. And for a man whose default setting is crush everything, choosing to leave something alone is practically a love letter. The most dangerous position in any empire is being noticed by the king. The second most dangerous is being found amusing by the king. I am currently occupying both positions simultaneously while selling kerosene lamps from a frozen town 600 miles away. My life is so weird. The emperor just saved my life, and he doesn't even like me. That's the funniest part of this whole thing. Here's what went down in the capital while I was busy bankrupting viscounts with cheap booze and superior salt. They held Arthur's trial. Not even a proper public trial. A backroom meeting with a dozen power players, because apparently my brother's destruction wasn't important enough for the main hall. That's like being fired via text message. At least give the man a full courtroom. The Golden Lion Duke showed up wearing his fanciest red outfit like it was prom night. He'd prepared a whole speech, probably rehearsed it in front of a mirror, slammed down his evidence folder and demanded Arthur be publicly hanged in the Imperial Square. He wanted a show. A big dramatic execution where everyone watches and thinks, wow, the Golden Lion Duke is so powerful, better not mess with him. Basically wanted to use my brother's neck as a marketing opportunity. The emperor listened to all of this with the enthusiasm of someone watching paint dry. Then he asked one devastatingly simple question: you think death is the harshest punishment? And then he made the Golden Lion Duke look like an amateur. Arthur, stripped of everything, demoted to slave status, shipped to the Black Obsidian mines for life. That place is basically a death sentence that takes years instead of seconds. Toxic air, endless digging in pitch darkness until your lungs rot and your muscles dissolve. Mother? Sent to a silent monastery, force-fed a drug that permanently destroys her voice. A former duchess who'll never speak another word for the rest of her life. I'm not going to joke about that. That's my brother and my mother. Even from someone who got shipped off to freeze by his own family. That's heavy. The emperor doesn't just defeat people. He erases them from existence while keeping them technically alive. But here's the political genius buried inside that cruelty. By choosing slow torture over public execution, the emperor stole the Golden Lion Duke's spotlight. No grand execution means no grand political theater. No theater means the Duke doesn't get to parade around as the empire's top enforcer. The emperor basically said, "This is my punishment, not your victory lap," without using those exact words. The Duke's face reportedly went through 17 shades of frustrated, but he bowed and said, "Your Majesty is wise, because what else can you say when the guy with absolute power out cruelty's your cruelty?" Then, and this is where my neck was on the line, the Duke tried to drag me into it. Speaking of traitor families, that Lorien kid in the north still hasn't given up his territory, and he's clearly behind all these. The emperor cut him off like a teacher interrupting a student who's been talking too long. I hear the trade alliance has been rather chaotic lately. A few new products caused enough trouble to require a bishop's intervention. When did imperial commerce become so fragile? Translation: I know you've been trying to monopolize the market, You greedy idiot, and I'm not pleased. The Duke's breathing reportedly stopped for a solid 2 seconds. Then the Emperor dropped my protection like it was nothing. Casual as ordering lunch. The North is cold and dangerous. Lorien may have lost his title, but he's spending his fortune building a cathedral for the church. That's practically redemption for the Bohemian name. Let him build his little church. The army is busy down south anyway. No resources to waste on some remote villages. Every single word was precision engineered. Let him build his church means nobody touch him. The army is busy means I'm not sending troops and neither are you. Remote villages means I'm deliberately downplaying how important this actually is so nobody has an excuse to escalate. The Emperor walked out. Meeting over. The Duke stood there looking like he'd swallowed a lemon wrapped in a hornet. He understood perfectly what happened. The Emperor isn't protecting me because he cares about some kid growing tomatoes in the snow. He's protecting me because I'm annoying the Golden Lion Duke. As long as I exist, the Duke's commercial empire has competition, his northern expansion stalls, and his power growth has a speed bump. I'm not a person to the Emperor. I'm a pebble he deliberately left in the Duke's shoe. And you know what? I'll take it. Being a pebble in the right shoe is infinitely better than being a corpse in the wrong grave. The Emperor thinks I'm a minor nuisance he can use as a counterweight and discard later. The Golden Lion Duke thinks I'm a problem he can't solve because the Emperor won't let him. And meanwhile, this minor nuisance is sitting on 7,000 soldiers, revolutionary technology, a church endorsement, a growing industrial empire, and a navigation compass that's about to corner the maritime market. They all think I'm small. They all think I'm temporary. They all think I'm just a convenient pawn in their grand chess match. That's exactly what I want them to think. Because the moment a pawn crosses the whole board without anyone bothering to stop it, it becomes a queen. And by the time they notice, it's usually too late to do anything about it. Keep ignoring me, Your Majesty. Every day you look the other way is another factory I build, another territory I absorb, another 1,000 people who'd go to war for me. Your pebble is getting heavier, and your shoe is running out of room. Allow me to describe the greatest military siege in the history of warfare, in which not a single sword was swung, not a single arrow was fired, and the primary weapon was barbecue. I'm sitting outside the Yellow Cedar Viscount's castle walls right now, wrapped in a black bear fur coat, sipping hot tea, watching my soldiers eat roasted lamb, seasoned with cumin and pepper, while getting paid in front of an audience of starving enemy soldiers. This is my idea of war. Some generals study battle formations. I study human psychology and the smell radius of grilled meat in cold wind. Here's the setup. My iron guard camps 300 meters from the castle walls. No catapults. No battering rams. No dramatic speeches about glory and honor. Just rows of tents, roaring bonfires, and whole sheep rotating on iron spits. My cooks are out here seasoning meat like they're competing on a cooking show, using my premium refined salt and northern spices, and the wind is doing exactly what wind does, carrying that incredible smell straight up the castle walls and directly into the nostrils of soldiers who haven't eaten a real meal in 3 days. Their dinner tonight. Half a brick of bread mixed with sawdust and soup so thin it's basically warm water with ambitions. My soldiers' dinner? Carved to order roasted lamb with a side of strong liquor and a paycheck. Because yes, I'm also distributing monthly wages right there in the open. Big wooden chests overflowing with silver coins. Military accountants calling out names and amounts loud enough for the walls to hear. Private Thomas, regular pay plus field deployment bonus. 2 silver coins and 50 coppers. Collect your money and grab your roast meat and booze. Every clink of those coins echoes up to those frozen, hungry, unpaid guards standing on that wall in rusty armor with their hands stuffed in their clothes for warmth. One skinny kid up there swallowed so hard the whole wall probably heard it. An older soldier next to him muttered, "Don't look, it's the devil's temptation," while his own eyes stayed glued to the silver pile like it owed him money. My commander, Rain, came over looking antsy. "Sir, the boys are getting restless just sitting here. Say the word, and I'll have that Viscount's head on your desk within an hour." I asked him how many we'd lose. "Maybe 20, he said. 20. 20 of my elite soldiers. Each one trained, fed, equipped, and generating daily income through my system. To take a castle that's already collapsing from the inside like a sandcastle in a rainstorm? Absolutely not. If victory isn't absolute, then it's absolutely not victory. I want 0 casualties. 0. Not 19, not 1. 0. Rain looked at me like I'd just asked him to teach a fish to juggle. Sir, war always has casualties, not my war. My war has roasted lamb. I told him to wait until tonight. Jealousy, hunger, and the psychological devastation of watching someone else live your dream life 300 meters away. Those forces are more destructive than any cannon. They'll open that gate themselves. And inside those walls, pure chaos. The yellow cedar Viscount is pacing around his hall like a caged animal in a velvet robe that looks increasingly ridiculous given the circumstances. His officers suggested surrendering, and he literally slapped a wine cup across the room and screamed about how he's a real Viscount, and I'm just, hey, disown nobody from a traitor family. Cool speech, bro. Your soldiers are trying to climb down the walls to defect to my barbecue camp. 2 squads already attempted it tonight and got killed by their own side for trying. And the rest? Their eyes have that look, the look that says, if we don't get food and money by morning, these spears are pointing inward. The Viscount can scream about his title all he wants. Titles don't fill stomachs. You know what fills stomachs? Roasted lamb with cumin seasoning, served 300 meters away, available to anyone smart enough to open a gate. This isn't a siege. It's a restaurant with a really aggressive marketing strategy. And the competitor across the street is serving sawdust bread and excuses. I give it until sunrise. I was mid-sip on what was genuinely an excellent cup of red tea when 1,000 starving lunatics came screaming out of the castle gates waving rusty pitchforks and yelling about roast meat. I'll be honest, I did not see this coming. My whole plan was to sit here grilling lamb until their soldiers mutinied and delivered the Viscount's head on a stick. Clean, elegant, 0 casualties. Instead, this absolute walnut of a man decided to open his gates and charge my professional army with a mob of guys who haven't eaten in 3 days. That's not a military strategy. That's a suicide note with a battle cry attached. Apparently, some mercenary with a beard and an inflated sense of tactical genius convinced the Viscount that since my troops were relaxed and eating, this was the perfect moment for a surprise attack. Rush out, kill me personally, and the Iron Guard collapses. Brilliant plan. One tiny flaw, everything about it. The Viscount rallied his troops with the most inspirational speech in military history. Charge and you can have their barbecue and silver coins. Nothing says noble warfare like motivating your army with the promise of stealing someone else's lunch. He rode out on a horse so skinny you could count its ribs from the city wall, waving his family banner like he was leading some glorious crusade instead of a desperate food robbery. Now, here's the part where I'm supposed to dramatically draw my sword, mount a white horse, and ride into battle like some storybook hero. Yeah, no. I put down my tea, stood up, told Rain to deploy heavy shields, crossbows, and cannons, and then walked. Not ran, walked, to the back of the camp behind 2 layers of Iron Guard protection. Didn't even turn around to watch. My life is worth more than every noble in the North combined. A commander who stands in the front line gambling on not catching a stray arrow isn't brave. He's an idiot with a death wish and poor risk management skills. But Lorien, what about honor and glory? Honor doesn't run a territory. Glory doesn't feed 70,000 people. You know what does? Me. Alive. Drinking tea in the safe zone while my extremely well-paid, well-fed, well-trained army handles a mob of starving farmers like it's a Tuesday afternoon drill. And handle it they did. My soldiers went from guys casually enjoying barbecue to fully deployed killing machine in under 10 seconds. One moment, they're carving lamb with their knives. Next moment, the bonfires are kicked over, the silver chests are slammed shut, and every man is in formation with weapons ready. 10 seconds. That's what happens when you feed and pay your army properly. They perform like professionals because they are professionals. The Viscount's army, and I'm using that word so loosely it might fall apart, much like their equipment, came stumbling across 300 meters of snowy ground looking like the world's saddest stampede. Red-eyed from hunger, swinging rusty farm tools, wearing armor that was more whole than metal. Some of them were literally running toward the smell of food. Not toward victory, toward dinner. I had expected them to mutiny, tie up their lord, and hand him over in exchange for a hot meal and a job application. That was the civilized outcome. Instead, their mercenary advisor convinced them to do the one thing guaranteed to get the maximum number of people killed for the minimum strategic benefit. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I felt a flicker of pity. These weren't warriors. They were hungry people who got talked into running at cannons by a man who probably planned to slip away during the chaos. The Viscount was too dumb to see it, and now 1,000 lives were barreling toward my defensive line like moths toward the world's most heavily armed candle. I kept walking toward the rear. Behind me, I heard Rain barking orders. The heavy shields locked into place with a satisfying crunch. The crossbow mechanisms clicked. The cannon crews loaded their positions. Brave leaders ride into battle. Smart leaders build systems so good they don't have to. Guess which kind lives longer? My paranoia just saved my life, and I didn't even know it yet. So there I was, strolling to the back of my camp like a man leaving a boring party, while 1,000 screaming maniacs crashed into my shield wall like a human tsunami hitting a steel beach. First volley of crossbow bolts turned the front runners into a scene I'd rather not describe in detail. Let's just say rusty chainmail versus precision steel arrows is not a fair matchup, and white snow turns red very quickly. The survivors kept coming because hunger makes people crazy. They were literally climbing over their own fallen comrades to get closer to where the barbecue used to be. It was horrifying and heartbreaking, and also exactly why I didn't want to fight this battle in the first place. These aren't enemy warriors. They're starving people who got tricked into running at cannons. But here's the part that makes my skin crawl in hindsight. That mercenary who talked the Viscount into charging? The bearded, tactical genius who showed up 3 days ago offering his services. He wasn't a mercenary at all. He was a fourth-tier assassin called Hawkowl, hired by the Golden Lion Duke from some shadow guild that apparently just rents out superpowered killers like a terrifying lending library. This man's special abilities, and I cannot stress how unfair this is, include reshaping his own skeleton to change his body type and completely suppressing every trace of his life force so he registers as a rock to anyone with supernatural senses. A shape-shifting, undetectable murder machine who infiltrated the Viscount's territory, manipulated him into launching this idiotic charge, and planned to use the chaos as cover to sprint through the battlefield and personally stab me in my tea-drinking face. The whole battle was never about the Viscount winning. It was about creating enough noise, blood, and confusion for one invisible killer to slip through and put a blade in my neck. Every screaming soldier, every clash of metal, every explosion, all of it was just a distraction so this guy could cross 100 meters without being noticed. And his plan was perfect. Almost. Because when Hawkowl looked through the chaos toward where I was supposed to be sitting, the command position, center of camp, where any normal leader would be standing heroically while issuing orders, he found an empty chair and a cooling cup of tea. I was already gone. Way gone. Behind multiple rows of pike formations. Behind 2 massive tower shields positioned specifically to block any projectile, magical attack, or determined assassin. Peeking out with half my head like a turtle who heard a suspicious noise, ready to jump on a horse and disappear at the first sign of anything remotely threatening. According to intelligence I gathered later, the assassin apparently cursed in some extremely colorful regional dialect at that moment. This man has killed dukes, bishops, and battle-hardened generals. He's murdered his way through the Empire's most protected targets. But he has never, his words, reportedly, encountered a military commander who retreated this far back, this fast, against an army of starving farmers. He called my caution nauseating. I call it still being alive. See, every other leader in this world stands at the front because they think it's brave and honorable. And you know what happens to brave, honorable leaders? They get assassinated by fourth-tier shapeshifters hiding in fake cavalry charges. My absolute refusal to be anywhere near danger. The thing that makes knights laugh and generals shake their heads. Just accidentally added 100 extra meters between me and a professional killer who can cross 100 meters in a few heartbeats. Was I being cautious because I suspected an assassin? No. I was being cautious because I'm always cautious. I retreat from everything. A suspicious bird could fly over my camp, and I'd move behind a shield. That's not cowardice. That's a survival philosophy so extreme it accidentally counters assassination plots I didn't even know existed. The universe rewards paranoia. Write that down. Meanwhile, Hawkowl is recalculating. His perfect plan just got stretched by an extra 100 meters of heavily armed soldiers and portable fortifications, all because his target is the most aggressively non-heroic commander in military history. He's going to try something desperate now, I'm sure. Something extreme, as assassins say when their plan A gets ruined by a guy who won't stop hiding behind things. Good luck, buddy. I've got tower shields, pike walls, and the survival instincts of a cockroach who read a book on risk management. You're going to need a lot more chaos than this. Let me tell you about the single greatest security decision I've ever made. And it involves a password so stupid that a world-class assassin's brain literally broke trying to guess it. While the battle was raging at my shield wall, 1,000 starving guys bouncing off steel like popcorn hitting a lid, this assassin called Hawk Owl was doing his thing. And I have to give credit where it's due. This man is terrifying. He killed one of my Iron Guard soldiers in the chaos, dragged the body behind a pile of corpses, and then, and this is the nightmare fuel part, he literally reshaped his own skeleton. Bones cracking and stretching, face muscles squirming around like worms under skin, until he looked exactly like the dead soldier. Same height, same build, same scar on the chin. Then he put on the dead man's armor and just walked into my army, like he belonged there. A fourth-tier supernatural assassin wearing my own soldier's face, carrying my own soldier's weapon, smelling like my own soldier's sweat and blood. Walking backward through my defensive lines toward the guy sipping tea behind 2 tower shields. Me. The guy is me. He got past the first checkpoint easily. Some squad leader stopped him and asked why he was retreating. Hawk Owl fed him a perfect excuse. Broken spear, injured arm. Squad leader sent me back for a replacement weapon. Showed the broken weapon. Showed the dent in his armor. The squad leader bought it completely and waved him through. 50 steps from my position. 50 steps between a professional killer and my very important neck. Then he ran into my internal affairs officer, one of Sylvie's people. And this is where my genius, or possibly my insanity, paid off in the most spectacular way imaginable. The officer didn't ask for his unit number, didn't check his weapon, didn't look at his armor. He just stared at Hawk Owl with ice-cold eyes and said one word, password. And then he screamed, with the passionate intensity of a man who has practiced this exact phrase 500 times. Dong Qi Dong Qi. WOSHI Dong Yo. That's military radio code. From MY Previous World. Chinese PLA Numerical Communication Protocol. 0-7-0-7. This is 0 to 1. It means absolutely nothing in this fantasy medieval universe. Nothing. It sounds like a wizard having a stroke. It sounds like someone trying to cast a spell while choking on a pretzel. And that's exactly why I chose it. See, normal military passwords in this world are things like sword, and you respond, shield. Or someone says, north, and you say glory, poetic, meaningful, and absolutely crackable by any half-decent spy who hangs around military camps for a few days. My passwords, they're phrases from another dimension that have zero connection to any language, culture, or logic system that exists on this planet. You can't guess them. You can't decode them. You can't overhear someone using a similar phrase and deduce the pattern. Because there is no pattern. It's gibberish from a world that doesn't exist here. The only way to know the response is to have been personally briefed by someone in my command chain. Hawk Owl, a man who has infiltrated imperial vaults, decoded noble ciphers, and assassinated targets in the most heavily guarded locations on the continent, stood there with his brain doing a complete system crash. He later reportedly described the experience as cognitive collapse. This elite killer, who has an answer for everything, heard Dong Qi, and his internal hard drive just blue-screened. He took a desperate guess for the glory of the North. Wrong. My officer drew his sword and screamed, enemy spy, at a volume that could probably be heard in the capital. Hawk Owl's perfect disguise, the reshaped bones, the copied face, the stolen armor, the flawless military bearing, all of it defeated by a 6-syllable phrase that sounds like a drunk robot counting. He'd beaten every security measure this world could throw at him, and then got caught by a security measure from a different world that he couldn't even begin to comprehend. The assassin dropped his act immediately. His 4th-tier power exploded outward. He killed my officer with one slash, which makes me furious. That man was good at his job. and launched himself toward me like a human missile. 50 steps away. A fourth-tier supernatural killer moving at speeds that make arrows look lazy, heading straight for the most cautiously positioned, excessively defended, pathologically careful leader in military history. This is exactly the kind of situation my nauseating caution was designed for. Every tower shield, every pike wall, every extra meter of distance I put between myself and the action, all of it bought me seconds. And against a fourth-tier assassin, seconds are the difference between close call and funeral. I'd like to formally thank my past self for being the most unheroic commander alive. Today, cowardice wins again. Look, everyone keeps talking about honor and noble combat, and all that knightly nonsense. Me? I believe in winning. This assassin, some fourth-tier shadow killer called Hawk Owl, came tearing through my soldiers like a hot knife through butter, snapping necks with his legs, bouncing off helmets like some murderous parkour artist. Very impressive, very scary, and heading straight for me. My elite knight Sylvie? Not here. Any hidden high-level fighters? Also not here. Just me, 2 tower shields, and a dozen guards who might as well have been traffic cones against this guy. He looked at me expecting panic, noble terror, maybe some dignified begging. Instead, he got me standing there with my hands in my bare fur coat pockets like I was waiting for a bus. When he lunged, I casually tossed 2 little glass bottles into the air. He sliced them open because of course he did. Assassins can never resist showing off. Big mistake. Concentrated pepper spray exploded right in his face. Welcome to alchemy, friend. He screamed like someone shoved a hot iron into his eyeballs, which honestly isn't far from what happened. While he was crying and snotting everywhere, I dropped a smoke bomb on him for dessert. He called me classless. I call it efficient. Then he tried to charge blindly through the smoke, and his foot hit the industrial lubricant I'd poured all over the ground. This legendary killer did the most magnificent splits I've ever seen, then wiped out flat on his back like a cartoon character on a banana peel. Beautiful. Chef's kiss. He got desperate and fired a poison dart at my chest from the ground. It punched through my coat and went tink against my mithril chainmail underneath. Cost me a fortune, that armor. Worth every coin just for the look on his face. Somehow he managed to leap past the oil slick and land right in front of my shields. 1 step away from me, ready to take us both out. Real dramatic. Except he stepped directly onto my industrial-grade, instant bonding glue trap. His boots stuck to the ground like they'd been welded there. He had maybe 2 seconds of thrashing before the stuff would give way. 2 seconds was plenty. I pulled out my custom-built flintlock pistol, rifled barrel, top-grade steel, the absolute pride of my weapons program, and pressed it against his forehead. All that fourth-tier battle aura, all those superhuman reflexes, completely meaningless when you've got a gun barrel kissing your skull. He finally looked scared. Good. Sorry about this, General, I told him with my politest smile, and pulled the trigger. The bang echoed across the frozen north. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you deal with an assassin when you have 0 combat talent, but unlimited access to an industrial supply catalog. Everyone came rushing over after I'd already blown the guy's head off. Real helpful, thanks team. Rain, my first squad commander, practically trampled his own men getting to me. He threw himself on his knees in the snow, shaking like a leaf, begging for punishment. Behind him, dozens of Iron Guard soldiers dropped to their knees too. Sounded like someone dumped a crate of pots and pans. Meanwhile, I'm standing there looking cool as ice. Calm face. Steady eyes. Casually tucking my still warm pistol back into my coat, like it's a fountain pen. Get up, Rain, I said, smooth and collected. A fourth-tier assassin sneaking through chaos? Even the Royal Guard couldn't have stopped that. Rain looked up at me like I was some kind of god. In his eyes, I'd just faced a human pretzel monster without flinching and vaporized its skull with a magical thunder weapon. Yeah, about that. My right hand, the one hidden in my coat pocket, absolutely drenched in cold sweat. Squeezing so hard I might have bent the gun handle. Calm. Composed. All an act, baby. Every last bit of it. Because let me tell you, watching a living person bend their spine backwards like a possessed snake, cartwheel through a wall of spears, and land in front of you while ignoring every known law of physics, that's the kind of thing that makes your soul leave your body and file a complaint with management. If I hadn't spent months dealing with spy infiltrations and random assassination attempts back in Ashwood, training myself not to freeze up, My trigger finger would have been stiff as a brick. I'd be the headless one right now. So this is what a high-tier fighter looks like, I muttered, staring at the corpse and having a small existential crisis. The gap between third tier and fourth tier is absolutely stupid. My territory crushes everyone in military tech, economics, infrastructure, but in the individual murder machine department, we're a sieve. One fourth-tier fighter, and my entire guard looked like scarecrows in a hurricane. Sylvie needs to break through to fourth tier. Yesterday, preferably. And this pistol, my beautiful, skull-crushing, physics-equalizing pistol, has problems. Copperham and the Ashwood craftsman hand-forged it from scratch without precision machinery. It loads slower than a snail climbing a wall, and after that single shot, I could already feel the barrel warping inside. One gun, one shot, one slightly bent tube of expensive steel. Fantastic. New priority. Mass-produce these things. I don't care how much it costs. If I can't have high-tier fighters, I'll have 20 bodyguards with guns doing a firing squad instead. Let's see if fourth-tier assassin dodged that. I shoved my feelings down and asked about the battle. Turns out the actual war part was almost embarrassingly one-sided. Those starving yellow cedar peasant soldiers hit our shield wall and crossbow formation like eggs against a brick wall. Lasted less than 45 minutes. 400 dead, 500 surrendered. On our side, 3 killed in combat, 12 with minor fractures, 3 in a 1,000-man assault, 3. But then Rain's face went dark. 5 more brothers were killed by that assassin who snuck in. That hit different. 5 Iron Guard soldiers. 5 men I fed with white bread and meat soup. 5 walking silver coin generators from my system, gone forever because one bendy freak slithered through my defenses. My mood, already sour from nearly dying, crashed straight through the floor into the basement. Triple the standard death benefits for their families. Get the medics moving on the wounded. And bring me that idiot Viscount of Yellow Cedar. I let my voice go cold enough to freeze the snow twice over. This circus is over. The smoke cleared, the blood froze into the snow, and 500 prisoners were kneeling in the mud like the world's saddest choir practice. My soldiers dragged in the Yellow Cedar Viscount like a sack of wet laundry. This man, this genius, had abandoned his entire army mid-battle and tried to escape on a horse, so starved it looked like a skeleton wearing a horse costume. My scouts caught him in 3 miles. His horse took an arrow to the leg and dumped him into a snow ditch. Magnificent escape plan, truly. They threw him on his knees in front of me. And even now, covered in mud, his fancy velvet robe shredded by barbed wire and decorated with what I'm pretty sure was cow dung. This man had the absolute audacity to start screaming about his rights. Unhand me, you filthy peasants. Get your dirty hands off my robe, buddy. Your robe is 90% manure at this point. Nobody wants to touch it. I sat in my chair, calmly wiping my gloves with a handkerchief while he performed his little tantrum. Then I tossed the dirty cloth into the campfire and watched it burn. Nice metaphor, I thought. Very dramatic of me. I am an imperially appointed hereditary viscount, he shrieked, veins popping out of his eyeballs. The Noble Warfare Convention demands you give me a room with a fireplace, clean clothes, red wine, red wine. This man just sent 1,000 starving peasants to die and hired an assassin to kill me, and he wants room service. Then your family pays a ransom, 3,000 gold coins. And I'll even give you my territory. Rain leaned in behind me, knuckles white on his sword. My lord, permission to cut out his tongue? He's too loud. Tempting. Very tempting. Not yet, I said, and leaned forward slowly. I explained the situation to him in small words since his brain was clearly frostbitten. 2 weeks ago, I might have kept him alive, forged some paperwork saying he voluntarily handed over his lands, kept up appearances for the capital. Back then I still needed these old nobles as political window dressing. But things changed. The Golden Lion Duke showed his fangs in the Senate. Emperor Reynolds stripped my baron title. On paper, I'm already a rebel, a dead man walking who won't give up his territory. So why exactly would I keep playing nice? I've got Oakhaven and White River blocking the trade routes. Serena rebuilt the merchant network. The church's cathedral gives me religious cover. I don't need political buffer zones made of useless aristocrats anymore. The Viscount finally read the room. His face went from tomato red to corpse white in about half a second. You can't kill me. The Emperor will send armies. The Duke will destroy you. You're a traitor. You overestimate yourself. I cut him off, and you underestimate the Duke. To them, you were just a stray dog sent to test how hard I bite. I was already in a terrible mood. Nearly got killed by a Bindi assassin. Lost 8 good soldiers. 8 walking silver coin factories, gone. I had 0 patience left for this screaming idiot. I turned my back on him. Didn't even bother looking. Just raised my right hand and flicked it down. Kill him. Then take over the castle treasury and all population records. Rain's sword sang out of its sheath before I finished the sentence. That man had been waiting. No, wait. I'll submit. I'll be your schlick. Didn't even get to finish the offer. His head bounced across the mud and rolled to a stop right in front of the prisoners. 500 men collectively forgot how to breathe. No trial. No ransom. No noble courtesy. Just a head in the dirt and a body dropping like a rotten log. I could practically hear their thoughts. This Ashwood lord is worse than a devil. Good. That's the brand I'm going for. I pulled my bear coat tighter and walked toward my command tent without looking back. The Yellow Cedar Viscount was the last stubborn old blood holdout in the north. From today, this frozen wasteland runs by my rules. And my rules don't include wine service for people who try to have me murdered. Taking over Yellow Cedar was easier than making instant noodles. My officers have done this so many times now, they could conquer a territory in their sleep. Roll up with a few carts of hot bread and salt, set up in the town square, and watch the starving peasants immediately decide I'm the greatest leader who ever lived. Previous lord? What previous lord? Never heard of him. All hail, breadman. I dumped all the boring paperwork on Rain and hopped into my steel-lined carriage home. The moment I rolled through Ashwood's gates and smelled the blast furnaces, I finally unclenched muscles I didn't know I'd been clenching for 3 days straight. Then I heard hooves. Not normal hooves. Psychotic hooves. The sound of a horse being ridden so hard it was questioning its life choices. A massive northern warhorse came screaming down the street, soaked in sweat and ice, sparks flying off the cobblestones as it slammed to a stop. Foam dripping from its mouth. This horse had seen things. And off the saddle vaulted Sylvie, silver ponytail completely wrecked, armor splattered with mud, face white as paper. She looked like she'd ridden through a hurricane, a blizzard, and her own personal emotional apocalypse all at once. Apparently, she'd gotten an urgent message mid-mission. Lord Lorien attacked by 4th-tier assassin at close range. She didn't even finish her briefing. Just stole the fastest horse available and rode day and night like death itself was chasing her. She charged up the steps, saw me standing there perfectly fine, not a scratch on me, and her composure shattered into a million pieces. For one brief second, she opened her arms like she was going to hug me. My brain went, oh, but then her night training kicked in at the last possible millisecond. She slammed one knee into the stone instead. I deserve death. I wasn't there to protect you. Punish me. Whip me. Strip my title. Anything. Her shoulders were shaking. Her voice was cracking. This woman had genuinely believed I might be dead. I stood there feeling, honestly, kind of bad. And also kind of awkward, because I'm not great at emotional moments. I sighed, bent down, grabbed her freezing metal gauntlets, and pulled her up myself. I'm fine, see? Intelligence reports always exaggerate everything. That assassin didn't even touch my coat before I blew his head off with my new toy. This isn't your fault. But her eyes were red. She was biting her lip so hard it went white. No buts. I gave her a casual smile and said something I thought was a harmless little joke to lighten the mood. Though I'll admit, this whole thing taught me I'm actually terrified of dying. So as punishment, I guess you can never leave my side again. Even if I'm going to the bathroom. You're chained to Ashwood's war chariot for life. Cute joke, right? Light, funny, classic boss humor. Except Sylvie didn't take it as a joke. Never leave his side. Chained to him for life. Her eyes went wide. Something inside her cracked open. Boom. A silver shockwave exploded out of her body and blasted all the snow off the stairs. The air twisted and screamed. Her eyes lit up with actual supernatural light, and I could practically hear her bones and muscles rebuilding themselves in real time. She'd broken through. 3rd tier peak to 4th tier. Right here. Right now. On my front porch. Because of a joke. 2 years stuck at the bottleneck. 2 years of intense training getting nowhere. And what finally did it? Me making an offhand comment about bathroom supervision. Sylvie straightened up like a war goddess, slammed her fist against her chest plate with a sound like a church bell, and declared with the intensity of someone swearing a blood oath before the gods, "Upon my soul, Sylvie shall become your most indestructible shield. No matter the cost, I will protect Lord Lorien. For life." My smile froze on my face. My hair was blown sideways. I just stood there, blinking at this radiating fourth-tier knight who was practically on fire with devotion. "Excuse me? I was just trying to make you feel better." I hadn't even started my motivational speech yet. I had a whole plan. Train harder, believe in yourself, eat your vegetables. The standard power-up pep talk. You just did it yourself? This world's leveling system runs on feelings? You break through cosmic power barriers with the power of emotions? What kind of spiritualist nonsense upgrade mechanic is this? Does this place have any respect for the basic laws of reality? While I was still standing on the front steps with my hair blown sideways, trying to process the fact that my bodyguard just leveled up from a joke, I happened to glance up at the second floor. There was Serena, standing behind the window, sipping black coffee, no sugar, because apparently my big sister thinks happiness is optional. Just watching everything with those calculating eyes of hers, like a chess player studying the board. I know that look. That's her. I'm about to do something terrifyingly competent face. Now, I didn't know the details at the time, but here's what my dear sister was cooking up behind my back. Apparently she'd spent the last few days doing something I'd been too busy nearly dying to do. Actually auditing my entire industrial operation. Walked through every forge, every textile mill, even talked her way into the restricted alchemy lab. And with that scary merchant brain of hers, she zeroed in on the one problem I'd been trying not to think about. Precision manufacturing. Or rather, the complete absence of it. My head is full of designs, steam engines, gear systems, rifled firearms, all beautiful on paper. But Copperham, bless his heart, is still just a blacksmith with a really big hammer. Human hands have limits. You can't hand-forge parts that need microscopic tolerances. My pistol barrel warped after one shot. My steam engines sound like dying animals, and no amount of throwing money at the problem will give human craftsmen superhuman fingers. Without precision tooling, my entire industrial revolution hits a wall. Game over. Progress stopped. Everyone goes home. So what did Serena decide to do? She pulled out a map, looked past the entire central continent, and landed on the southern trade cities near the border territories. Dwarf craftsmen. The legendary master forgers who can shape metal with almost magical precision, whose fingers can feel tolerances that humans need instruments to measure. The ultimate cheat code for my manufacturing bottleneck. Problem is, dwarves are stubborn hermits who live in mountains and hate everyone. The few who end up in human lands are usually slaves, hoarded by southern nobles like golden geese. But my sister isn't just anyone. She's got the church's holy brand for credibility, brass windproof lanterns and honeycomb coal briquettes as trade bait, steel farming tools for the agricultural markets, and the big one, navigation compasses. The kind of strategic value item that makes southern sea trading nobles lose their minds. Did she tell me about this plan? Of course not. Because Serena doesn't do asking permission. She does dramatic reveals. She wants to roll back into Ashwood one day with a caravan full of grumpy, beer-soaked dwarf master craftsmen and just drop them at my feet like a cat, bringing home a particularly impressive dead bird. Look what I got you, little brother. Now say I'm indispensable. Before I even made it inside for dinner, I heard from a servant that she'd already summoned the Nightingale Trading Company's senior staff and ordered them to the South Warehouse District. Inventory check. Early departure south. Immediately, my sister saw a gap in my empire, designed a solution, sourced the assets, and launched the mission, all while I was outside getting accidentally power-leveled by my own knight. Honestly, I'm a little scared of her. In the best possible way. Southgate. Giant staging area. Snowflakes swirling everywhere, while beefy teamsters loaded crate after crate onto reinforced wagons using pulley systems. The whole place looked like the world's most militarized Christmas market. Serena was in the middle of it all, wearing a purple velvet cloak that somehow made her look like both a fashion model and a supply chain manager at the same time. Clipboard in hand, checking off inventory like she was born for this. Which, honestly, she was. The lineup was ridiculous. 20 heavy wagons, waterproofed and shock cushioned because my sister doesn't believe in half measures. 5 loaded with brass windproof lanterns, 5 packed with our new smokeless coal briquettes, 8 carrying northern furs and steel farming tool samples. And then the crown jewels, 2 specially guarded crates containing 100 navigation compasses, each one individually wrapped in silk like tiny mechanical babies. Any one of these products would cause a feeding frenzy in southern markets. Together, Serena was basically rolling south with a caravan full of economic nuclear weapons. The escort was equally impressive. 50 Iron Guard soldiers disguised as mercenaries, wearing mismatched leather and chain armor instead of their usual uniforms. They looked like common hired swords until you noticed the steel quality of their weapons and the crossbows hidden at their hips. These guys could start a small war and win. Plus a priest and 3 medically trained nuns carrying an official, holy fundraising decree from our cathedral. My favorite trick, dress the trade mission in church robes, and suddenly every greedy toll-collecting lord along the road has to think twice before shaking us down. Can't tax God's people too hard without looking like a terrible person. I strolled over with Sylvie, who was radiating her brand new 4th-tier energy like a walking space heater, and decided to add one small suggestion. Beautiful setup, dear sister. But take some of the type, 2 portable explosive packs the Ed brothers cooked up, just in case, because nothing says peaceful trade mission like hidden bombs. Serena turned around, chin raised, eyes blazing with the confidence of a woman who was about to economically conquer half a continent. The Northern Wars are your department. The Money Wars? That's my show now. I couldn't help but laugh. If I didn't let this woman go make deals, she'd literally go insane from boredom doing Ashwood paperwork. But I got serious for a moment. Leaned in close, so only she could hear. The Southern nobles aren't like our Northern idiots who charge at you with rusty swords. They'll smile at your face while burying poison clauses in paragraph 47 of a trade contract. They're foxes who eat people whole. Serena flicked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked at me like I'd just told a fish to be careful around water. Don't teach me how to do business, dear brother. At the negotiation table, I can make them lose their underwear. Fair point. Moving on. I tossed her a pocket watch engraved with our family's wisteria crest. Then I said something I actually meant, for once dropping the bravado. If you run into trouble that money, words, or swords can't fix, don't fight. Don't worry about the cargo. Everything on these wagons combined isn't worth 1/10,000th of your life. Come home alive with your people, and I'll personally roll up with cannons to collect what's owed. For half a second, her mask cracked. I saw something warm flash through her eyes before she buried it under attitude. Just make sure your warehouse is big enough for all the gold I'm bringing back, she sniffed. What she didn't tell me, because my sister is fundamentally incapable of not being dramatic, was that gold wasn't even her main objective. Somewhere in her head, she had a secret mission I knew nothing about. I could tell by the way she was smiling. That's her. I have a surprise and you're going to lose your mind, smile. Whatever. I'll deal with that mystery when it arrives. Move out, she swung onto a white southern warm-blood horse, because of course she picked the prettiest one, and the whole caravan lurched forward. 20 wagons, 50 disguised killers, for holy people, 20 elite negotiators, and 1 terrifyingly competent big sister, rolling south through the snow. I watched the wheel tracks disappear into the white horizon and thought, those southern nobles have absolutely no idea what's coming for them. I watched Serena's caravan disappear into the snowy hills, feeling all sentimental for about 30 seconds before Sylvie reminded me it was freezing. She'd been using her shiny new 4th-tier battle aura to melt snowflakes before they even touched me, like a personal anti-weather force field. Honestly, pretty neat. Also a terrifying reminder that 5th-tier fighters exist somewhere out there, and I should probably keep my head down until I've invented tanks and airplanes. Just saying. Back at the manor, my internal affairs guy Andrew was waiting with bloodshot eyes and a giant map, alongside Harold, the former Yellow Cedar chief. Clerk who looked like he was one loud noise away from fainting. Poor guy was still adjusting to working for the lord who decapitated his previous boss. We've finished the basic census and inventory of all 7 new territories, Andrew reported, then hit me with the bad news face. But we have a problem worse than hunger. Worse than hunger? In the frozen north? This should be good. Harold stepped up nervously and dropped the bomb. Mud, my lord, mud. When spring comes and the snow melts, every road in the north turns into a bottomless swamp that eats horses and wagons whole. Black sticky goo up to a horse's belly. 1 month of total transportation shutdown every single year. Meaning all the food and tools we just inventoried can't move them between territories. Might as well be on different planets. Andrew jumped in with the math. We know your cement is miraculous. Ashwood's roads put the imperial capital to shame. But the farthest territory is 180 miles away. If we mix cement by hand with shovels and carry it bucket by bucket, we'd need every able-bodied person in the territory working for 6 months. And then nobody plants crops. And then everybody starves. Classic infrastructure dilemma. Fix roads, lose food. Grow food, lose roads. Very medieval. Very annoying. I sipped my hot cocoa and smiled. Andrew, you're thinking with old-world logic. Who said anything about shovels? I got bit by the mud problem last spring. I am physically incapable of making the same mistake twice. Also, I'm from the future. We solved this one a long time ago. I opened my desk drawer and tossed a blueprint onto the map. Both of them leaned in like I'd just dropped a treasure chest. The drawing showed a big tilted cylinder mounted on a heavy four-wheeled cart, connected to the rear axle through a gear system. Basically, a giant rotating drum on wheels, pulled by horses. Gentlemen, meet the horse-powered gear-drive mixing cart. Their faces were priceless. Andrew looked like he was staring at an alien artifact. Harold's mouth fell open so wide a bird could have nested in it. I explained it slowly so their brains wouldn't overheat. For heavy draft horses pull the cart. When the wheels turn, the gears engage and spin the big drum on top. Workers load pre-measured cement powder, gravel, sand, and water into the drum before departure. Then the horses start walking toward wherever the road needs fixing. By the time they arrive, the concrete inside is perfectly mixed. Just open the gate at the bottom and pour it out onto the roadbed. The journey is the mixing process. No shovels. No armies of laborers. No choosing between roads and food. The horses do double duty, transportation and cement mixing, at the same time. Harold stood there breathing hard, desperately searching his brain for a reason this shouldn't work. He couldn't find one. The gears fit. The physics check out. The logic is airtight. I could see the exact moment his worldview cracked open. He looked at me like I was some kind of unholy genius sent by forces beyond mortal understanding. Genius? Please. I'm just a guy who remembers what a concrete mixer truck looks like and downgraded it to horsepower. But sure, call me a madman. I'll take it. Andrew nearly ripped his own beard off from excitement. He stared at my blueprint like it was a winning lottery ticket, babbling about 10 times efficiency gains and focusing labor only on gravel crushing and road flattening. Then I dropped the full plan on him. 3,500 workers, 500 war prisoners from Yellow Cedar Plus, 3,000 idle serfs from the new territories, organized into the 8th Construction Brigade. No free meals in my domain. You eat, you work. They handle the dumb labor, smashing rocks, flattening dirt. The machines handle the smart part. I want a central cross highway network radiating out from Ashwood to all 7 territories. 6 meters wide minimum. Before the spring thaw. When I'm done, muddy northern roads will be something people only read about in history books. Andrew bowed, so deep I thought he'd fold. In half, grabbed Harold, who still looked like his brain was buffering, and they both sprinted out of my office like caffeinated rabbits. Next stop, the machine shop. Because blueprints are just expensive toilet paper until someone actually builds the thing. The heavy industry district hit me with its usual greeting, black smoke, deafening hammering, an air that tasted like chewing on a railroad spike. Lovely. Inside the workshop, Copperham was doing what Copperham does best, screaming at apprentices. I said the umbrella gear tolerance can't exceed 1 millimeter. Look at this garbage. One bump in the road and the entire drive shaft explodes. The poor young craftsman looked ready to cry. Copperham was waving a giant hammer around like a conductor directing the world's angriest orchestra. And behind them, there she was. My beautiful, ugly baby. The first horse-powered cement mixer prototype. She was not pretty. Built from 100-year ironwood and reinforced steel bars, with a massive iron mixing drum covered in hand-riveted studs the size of my fist. The gear assembly underneath was slathered in black grease and clearly hand-ground, rough as a teenager's first shave. She looked like someone had welded a barrel to a siege engine and called it transportation. I loved her immediately. Lord, sir. Copperham dropped his hammer, beard dripping sweat. This thing was harder to build than a full set of knight's plate armor. He banged on the drum, deep metallic bong, and launched into complaints. The gear design was genius, sure, but their machine tools couldn't cut precise enough. They'd burned through their best high-carbon steel just to make gears that wouldn't shatter under thousands of pounds of wet concrete. I walked up, not caring that the grease was ruining my expensive gloves, and gave the wheel a spin. Screech. Horrible noise. Stiff as hell. The gears grudgingly bit together, and the giant drum rotated. Half a turn. But it turned. Beautiful work, Copperham. I meant it. How many are ready? 20, counting this one. He was panting. That's every man in the shop working around the clock in shifts. Our absolute limit. Enough. 20 mixer carts to crack open the road network. Once supplies start flowing, the steel costs pay for themselves. Then something in the corner caught my eye. A huge shape hiding under waterproof canvas like a sleeping monster. Is that the improved steam engine prototype? Copperham scratched his head and pulled the tarp off. There it sat. Primitive. Ugly. Leaking steam from 3 different joints. A crude boiler welded to rows of heavy steel rollers. Basically a fat metal caterpillar that could barely crawl forward. On flat ground. Per your blueprints, we bolted the boiler to the rollers, Copperham said, clearly underwhelmed by his own creation. But this thing is so heavy and slow, all it does is crawl forward and flatten dirt. Can't figure out what else it's good for, flatten dirt. I looked up at this hissing, dripping, gloriously primitive steam roller and grinned like a maniac. Flatten dirt is exactly what it does. That's the whole point, Copperham blinked. 3 days, I announced, already seeing the future unrolling like a fresh asphalt highway in my mind. Final adjustments. Then bring everything to the South Gate Plaza. I turned to face the workshop full of exhausted, soot-covered craftsmen and let my voice carry. The Old North dies under these steel beasts, and we're the ones driving them. Copperham slammed his fist against his chest, eyes literally shining. Ashwood above. I'm blessed to see this day. 20 concrete mixers. 1 steam roller. 0 respect for the medieval status quo. Let's build some roads. 3 days later. Southgate. Showtime. 3,500 workers lined up along the road in brand new winter clothes, holding shovels and rock hammers, looking at me like condemned men waiting for the executioner. The yellow cedar prisoners were whispering to each other, absolutely convinced I was about to make them dig their own graves in frozen dirt. Gods above, one old soldier muttered, blowing into his hands. Even iron men would freeze to death building roads in this weather. Oh, buddy, you have no idea what's about to happen. The city gates groaned open, and out rolled 20 of my beautiful, hideous cement mixing carts. 4 massive draft horses per cart, wrapped in insulated blankets, hauling these monstrous contraptions forward. The gear assemblies underneath screamed bloody murder, metal grinding on metal like the world's worst symphony. And then, right before everyone's eyes, the giant steel drums on top started spinning by themselves. The crowd lost their collective minds. What is that? Why is it moving on its own? Some of the more superstitious peasants literally dropped their shovels and tried to kneel and pray. My military supervisors had to yell at them to stop worshiping the cement truck. The carts reached the prepared road sections, mechanical latches popped open, and perfectly mixed gray concrete poured out like the world's most boring waterfall, smooth, even, beautiful, right onto the crushed gravel beds the workers had flattened earlier. No armies of sweating men stirring with shovels. No suffering. Just horses walking and physics doing its thing. A few hundred meters of perfect road surface, laid down like it was nothing. But then, WLO? A steam whistle screamed across the sky like a banshee having a bad day. From inside the gates, belching black smoke like an angry dragon, came the steam roller. No horses. No animals of any kind. Just a coal-burning boiler powering a multi-ton solid steel cylinder, crawling forward under its own power with the unstoppable confidence of something that knows nothing in its path matters. It rolled over the fresh concrete and flattened it smooth as glass. The prisoners went completely silent. 3,500 people stared at a machine that moved by itself, breathed smoke, and crushed everything flat. And every single one of them had the same thought at the same time. What the hell were we fighting against? The old soldier who'd been complaining earlier? His knees buckled. He dropped to the ground, not praying to any god, just surrendering to the raw, incomprehensible power of industry. Up on the wall, I watched my road project roll forward on schedule, nodded once, and turned away. Enough spectacle for one morning. Roads are handled. Time for the thing that's actually keeping me up at night. I walked into the fortress war room where Copperham and Sylvie were waiting. No small talk. I pulled the flintlock pistol from my coat and slammed it on the table. Copperham, this gun saved my life. It's also basically broken after one shot. The barrel's warped inside. I stared at him with what I hope was an intimidating fire in my eyes look. I've personally experienced what a fourth-tier fighter can do. If my survival plan is pepper spray and floor lube, I'm eventually going to run out of luck. The next assassin will kill me. Or worse, kill someone I can't afford to lose. Copperham picked up the pistol nervously and squinted at the rifling grooves inside. He winced. My lord, it's not the boy's fault. Hand-carving perfectly symmetrical spiral grooves inside a narrow steel tube with uniform thickness. It's basically impossible. Exactly. So stop doing it by hand. I leaned across the table like a man possessed. The steam engine moves a road roller, so it can move a machine tool. Build me a steam-powered deep bore drill press and a rifling machine. I don't care what it takes. I could feel something slightly unhinged rising in my voice, and I did not care one bit. Swords can't beat fourth-tier battle aura? Fine. We don't need swords. We need volume. I want this pistol to stop being my personal toy and become a mass-produced standard weapon. 20 working flintlock rifles. 1 month. Equipped to my personal guard. If I can't outfight these superhuman freaks, I will simply outgun them until the concept of melee combat becomes a historical footnote. Copperham's eyes went wide. Then they went bright. 20 guns. 1 month. Steam-powered manufacturing. The Industrial Revolution doesn't ask permission. It just shows up and makes everything before it obsolete. My favorite weapon isn't cannons or guns. It's plumbing. See, I relocated a bunch of scholars, craftsmen, and minor noble families from the 7 conquered territories into Ashwood's new North District housing. Neat rows of red brick and cement duplexes. No gold-plated nonsense. Just clean, orderly, aggressively civilized living quarters. They hated it, naturally. Especially this old legal scholar named Elric, who spent his first morning grumbling at his window like a gargoyle in a bathrobe that didn't fit anymore. This tyrant has pinned us in like livestock. We don't even have servants to fetch water. Does he expect dignified people to queue at a public well with commoners? Sure, he admitted the food was amazing. Fresh milk, soft white bread, smoked meat every day. But his dignity, his precious, precious dignity. Then his granddaughter Lily called him to the washroom. Old Elric shuffled in and found a weird room. White ceramic tiles everywhere, a funnel-shaped porcelain basin, and sticking out of the wall, a gray pipe ending in a strange brass valve with a cross-shaped handle. What is this? Some alchemical decoration? He muttered, and because scholars can't resist touching things they don't understand, he twisted the handle. Click. Air hissed through the pipe. Elric flinched, assuming he'd triggered a booby trap, because apparently that's where his mind goes. Instead, whoosh. Crystal clear water poured out of the wall. No mud. No sand. No horse poop aftertaste. Clean as mountain snow melt, streaming right into the basin and draining away through a hole in the bottom. His monocle nearly fell in the sink. Impossible. Is this high-tier water magic? No. There's no supernatural energy. He touched the water with a trembling finger. Cool, smooth, pure. He stared at the pipe welded into the brick wall, brain short-circuiting as he tried to figure out how water was just coming out of a building on command. No servants trudging through blizzards to a frozen well. No melting ice blocks over a fire. Just twist a little brass handle and boom. Water appears from inside the wall like you ordered room service from reality itself. Then Lily found the other valve. Oh, grandfather. This one is warm. The shriek of pure delight that came out of that child could have melted glaciers. Here's my little secret. Ashwood steam engines produce mountains of waste heat every day. So when I laid the water pipes, I routed them through a basic heat exchange system underground. Nothing fancy. Can't boil water with it. But it keeps the flow around 20-something degrees. In a place where spit freezes before it hits the ground, lukewarm running water is basically a religious experience. Old Elric stood there watching warm water pour endlessly from a hole in his wall, and I could practically hear his worldview collapsing from across town. Suddenly he understood why my Iron Guard soldiers had looked at his homeland like it was a backward village. Because it was. This isn't barbaric tyranny, he whispered, eyes closed, speaking to no one. This is a civilization that stepped on the gods and kept walking. Thank you, old man. That's going on a motivational poster. Meanwhile, I was standing at Ashwood's central water tower, listening to two massive low-pressure steam pumps go thunk 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 as they pushed filtered groundwater, cleaned through layers of sand and activated charcoal, up into a 20-meter concrete tank. Gravity does the rest, pushing water through pipes to every corner of town like blood through veins. The housing officials reported that the new residents' water usage had already spiked, meaning they weren't boycotting. They weren't protesting. They were taking long, warm, wonderful washes and quietly falling in love with indoor plumbing. This is my real conquest strategy. Forget swords and speeches. Once these people get used to turning a handle for clean water, walking on smooth cement roads, and using a toilet that doesn't require a guy with a bucket, they will never go back. You could put a blade to their throats and drag them toward their old moldy castles, and they'd fight you harder than any army. Comfort is the most powerful chains, and I just locked them on with hot running water and ceramic tiles. Now, I wasn't there for this part, but Serena's. People reported everything back in detail, and honestly, I wish I'd been hiding in one of those wagons just to watch my sister work. After a month of traveling south, the caravan finally left the snow behind and hit rain. Endless, miserable, southern rain turning every road into a soup bowl. Made me grateful for my cement highways back home, honestly. They arrived at Ragetide City, the biggest trade hub on the border between the Empire and the southern nations. Locals call it the capital of gold and lies, which tells you everything about the kind of people who run the place. At the North Gate, a fat tax official with beer-soaked eyeballs and a belly that arrived 3 seconds before the rest of him waddled up to my sister's caravan like Christmas came early. Stop. Everything stops. 30% entry tax on all foreign goods. Plus 5 silver coins per wagon for road damage. 30%. 30. That's not taxation. That's mugging with paperwork. But Serena had prepared for exactly this flavor of nonsense. Marcus, her senior trade manager, calmly produced a scroll stamped with Bishop Cantarella's official church seal. Then the caravan priest stepped forward in his white and gold robes, drew a holy cross on his chest, and asked with maximum spiritual passive aggression, "We are collecting donations for a new Cathedral of Holy Light. Are you quite certain you wish to charge God 30%? The taxman's face did that beautiful thing where greed fights terror and terror wins. He coughed, smiled his fakest smile, and waived the tax immediately. But then, because greedy people can never fully let go, he insisted on checking the cargo list. Just routine, of course. Totally not looking for a bribe opportunity. Marcus handed over the surface-level manifest. The taxman read it, and his whole attitude flipped from scared to smug. Brass windproof lanterns? Smokeless coal? Steel farm tools? He literally threw the list back at Marcus and laughed out loud. I thought you northern barbarians might have something special. This is junk. He turned to his soldiers for an audience, clearly loving the sound of his own voice. Maybe a few months ago you could have found suckers for this stuff. But now, the whole southern market is flooded with cheap knockoffs from the capital and knockoff alchemy workshops. Those fake lanterns leak oil so bad they'll set your pants on fire. Those fake coal bricks smoke worse than wet firewood. My blood boiled just hearing the report. The Golden Lion Duke's counterfeit garbage and the capital's second-hand dealers had gotten here first and completely poisoned the market. Every southern merchant now thought my products were overpriced trash because they'd only seen the terrible copies. The taxman was already waving the caravan through, grinning like he was watching idiots walk into a wall. Then the carriage door opened. A hand in a black velvet glove pushed it aside, and out stepped Serena. Didn't care about the mud. Didn't care about the rain. Just radiated the kind of pure aristocratic authority that makes everyone within 50 feet shut up and stand straighter without knowing why. You're right, tax officer, she said, voice cold enough to frost glass. The stuff on the market is disgusting garbage. She paused just long enough for him to feel confused. But that's because you pathetic southern provincials have never seen the real thing. She snapped her fingers at Marcus without even turning her head. Light the lamp. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why you don't underestimate a woman who once ran the biggest commercial empire in the imperial capital. The southern market thought it knew what my products looked like. They had absolutely no idea. I got every detail of this from Serena's reports afterward, and I swear, reading them was more entertaining than any novel. So Marcus pulled out one of our newest windproof lanterns, second generation, sleeker, lighter, better in every way, because that's what happens when your factory workers actually improve over time. Instead of just copying the same garbage forever, he lit it right there in the pouring rain. No cover, no shelter, and even shook it around like a maniac for dramatic effect. The flame didn't flicker, didn't smoke, didn't leak. The glass threw warm orange light across the entire gate area, including directly onto the taxman's face, which had gone from smug to, I just swallowed a live frog, because he'd seen the knockoffs. The Golden Lion Duke's cheap imitations that spit fire sideways if you breathe near them. The capital's resold junk that leaked oil like a wounded animal. He thought that was what windproof lanterns were. He had absolutely no idea what the real thing looked like. Serena didn't even bother explaining further. Just told him the stuff he'd been buying was toys made by clumsy thieves, and rolled her caravan straight through the gates. Ice cold. Didn't look back. But here's where my sister really started cooking. She knew impressing a gate guard was worth exactly nothing. The southern market had been poisoned by counterfeits. Every merchant down here now thought northern products meant expensive garbage. To fix that, she needed the big fish. 3 hours after checking into the White Gull Tavern, a gold-embossed invitation showed up at her door, smelling like ambergris perfume. Delivered by a butler in a tailcoat, naturally, because rich southern people can't even send mail without making it a production. The invitation came from Viscount Cavendish, chairman of Ragetide City's Trade Council and one of the biggest merchant lords in the entire South. Old money, old tricks, old fox. That evening, Red Pine Manor. A 10-meter oak dining table with linen tablecloths, silver candlesticks, crystal wine glasses, the full Southern aristocrat starter pack. Serena showed up in a dark gold off-shoulder evening gown that reportedly made half the room forget how to form sentences. She sat there cutting veal into tiny pieces like she was at the Imperial Palace, completely unbothered. Cavendish, thin, gray-haired, eyes sharp as broken glass, opened with the classic Southern noble move. Fake sympathy wrapped around a knife. What a surprise that the legendary Nightingale Trading Company has graced our humble Southern backwater. If you'd come 2 months ago, I'd have bought everything at full price. But alas, dramatic sigh, the market is saturated. The Golden Eagle Trading Company is opening a branch here. The Duke's knockoffs are everywhere. Best I can do is 30% of capital market price. As a favor to the Wisteria family name, of course, 30%. That wouldn't even cover shipping costs. This withered old lizard wasn't negotiating. He was testing whether Serena was desperate enough to be robbed. My sister put down her silverware, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and smiled the kind of smile that makes experienced predators suddenly feel like prey. How generous of you, Viscount. But I think there's been a misunderstanding. She leaned forward, candlelight dancing in her eyes. I didn't drag 20 wagons across a continent to sell you products that other people already ruined. I brought the originals, the kind that make the Golden Eagle branch shut down before it opens and turn every one of the Duke's knockoffs into scrap metal overnight. The room got very quiet. Our factory originals cost less than you'd imagine and outclassed the copies by 2 full generations of craftsmanship. I don't need you to graciously buy my stock at a discount. She locked eyes with the old fox. I want 3 of Ragetide City's core tax-free warehouses and your distribution network access. In exchange, I'll supply you exclusively at 10% above capital wholesale prices. Cavendish's fake smile melted right off his face. His cigarette hand froze midair. He'd walked into this dinner thinking he was about to fleece a desperate princess fallen from grace. Instead, he was sitting across from a lioness who'd just announced her intention to bite through the jugular of the entire Southern trade network. That's my sister. You think she's the damsel. She's the dragon. I read Serena's field report about the Cavendish dinner 3 times. Not because I needed to, because it was art. So old man Cavendish, this dried-up Southern trade shark who's been eating people alive for decades, heard Serena's offer and thought, easy prey, desperate northern princess. Let me squeeze her until she pops. He leaned back in his fancy chair, laced his fingers over his belly, and basically said, "Sweetheart, this is MY City. Without MY stamp, your cargo rots in a barn. I want exclusive Southern distribution rights, 30% off your price, and you pay warehouse rent. Take it or leave. Translation, give me everything for free and thank me for the privilege." Any normal merchant would have been sweating through their shirt, frantically calculating how much dignity they could afford to sacrifice. My sister laughed at him. Actually laughed. Then picked up her wine glass and swirled it around like she was reviewing the vintage at a casual Sunday brunch. "Your greed is delightful, Viscount. But remind me, your family isn't the only power in Rage-Tide City, is it?" Then she dropped the bomb. "The Sterling Maritime family controls 30% of Southern oceanic trade. Has been trying to break into inland distribution for years. You've been blocking them with your Trade Council authority." Cavendish's face went dark. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that while my wagons were rolling through your north gate, I already sent 200 lanterns and a full cart of smokeless coal to the Sterling estate as a welcome gift, along with the exact same partnership offer I just gave you." The old man literally knocked his dinner plate off the table, jumping to his feet. "You're using my enemy to threaten me?" "Threaten? This is called competitive bidding, dear Viscount." Serena didn't even stand up. Just sat there sipping wine while this Southern trade titan had a meltdown in his own dining room. "You can absolutely use your council authority to shut me out. But before the ink dries, the Sterlings will be selling my superior, cheaper products from every storefront in your territory, while your shops are still stocked with the Duke's leaky, overpriced knockoffs. Picture it, your lifelong customers walking past your door to buy from them." Cavendish pointed at her with a shaking finger. He'd walked into this dinner thinking he was the cat. Turns out he was the mouse, and the cat had been toying with him since before the appetizers arrived. She hadn't come to negotiate. She'd come with a loaded weapon pointed at the fault line between the two biggest families in the city. All she had to do was pull the trigger. 3 tax-free warehouses, distribution access, my original price, contract to my hotel by midnight, and we're best friends forever. Serena stood, smoothed her gown, and headed for the door. "If not, tomorrow morning, every piece of my inventory gets the Sterling family crest stamped on it and goes on public sale in the city's main square. Have a lovely evening, Viscount." Door closed. Heels clicking down the hallway. Gone. Cavendish reportedly collapsed back into his chair, stared at his untouched dinner, and looked like a man who'd just been mugged by a symphony orchestra. According to Marcus, the signed contract arrived at the White Gull Tavern at 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes to spare. When I read that part, I laughed so hard I spilled my hot cocoa. My sister didn't just open the Southern market. She kicked the door off its hinges, walked in wearing heels, and made the biggest shark in town. Hand her the keys while saying, "Thank you. I'm starting to think the most dangerous weapon in the Wisteria family arsenal isn't my guns or my factories. It's Serena in an evening gown." Serena's reports kept arriving, and the story went from business thriller to spy novel real fast. The Cavendish contract landed at 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before deadline. The old fox's butler showed up drenched in sweat, clutching a gold-sealed document like his life depended on it, which, knowing Cavendish, it probably did. Within 1 week, my sister bulldozed through Rage-Tide City's trade scene like a freight train through a picket fence. Windproof lanterns and smokeless coal swept the distribution networks. Steel farming tools grabbed the lower-end market. Money was pouring in. But Southern gold comes with Southern poison. Always. Marcus reported the fun stuff. Someone hid bone rot rat poison in the hay bales outside our warehouse. If it had been lit, the toxic smoke would have suffocated half the night guards in their sleep. Then one of our accountants got, randomly, attacked by a drunk on his way home. The attacker bit down on a suicide pill before anyone could question him. Very convenient drunk. Cavendish, that wrinkly old snake. He signed the deal with one hand and sicked the other damaged families on us with the other. Classic Southern hospitality. Toast you at dinner, stab you in the spine when you turn around. Serena didn't even look at the poison. Just sipped her island red tea and told Marcus to clean up the body, double the warehouse guards, and move on. As long as they weren't sending actual armies, she considered it background noise. Sewer rats playing sewer rat games. Because she had bigger prey in mind. "Marcus, the other thing I asked you to investigate. The dwarves. Any progress?" Marcus pulled out a sealed scroll, and his face went grim. Turns out my sister had massively underestimated the problem. Dwarf society has its own brutal class system. The ones who end up as slaves in human markets? Mostly just strong-armed miners or guys who can hammer out a cooking pot on a good day. Total amateurs. The real masters, the legendary craftsmen who can forge metal with inhuman precision, are respected elders in their mountain clans. Nobody captures them. They don't end up in iron cages at slave auctions. Marcus had thrown piles of silver at 3 different underground slave markets across multiple cities, screened 50 dwarf slaves. Every single one failed the basic test. They couldn't even read a caliper, let alone do precision machining. Not a single master? Serena asked. Then the real question, or are there masters, but they're just not in the slave markets? Marcus flipped to the last page of his report. Your instincts are correct, as always. We bypassed the slave traders entirely and investigated the private workshops of several top-tier southern noble families. He paused. 300 miles from here. A territory called Tulip Domain. We found our target. Now that's more like it. Of course, the good dwarves wouldn't be rotting in public auction houses. They'd be locked away in some rich noble's private collection, forging masterworks that never see the open market. My sister wanted master craftsmen. The slave markets had trash. So she did what any reasonable person would do. She started hunting through aristocratic private vaults instead. I'm starting to think reasonable isn't the right word for Serena. Terrifying fits better. 300 miles deeper into hostile southern territory, chasing after dwarven master smiths held by powerful nobles who definitely don't want to sell them. Just another Tuesday for the Wisteria family. Serena's next report made me spit out my cocoa. The target, a dwarf family. Father named Balin Steelforge, plus 2 sons and a daughter. 4 dwarves total, and not just any dwarves. Balin was a former chief grand master of ancient runic maintenance from a Highland dwarf clan. A living, breathing, beer-drinking precision machine tool with a beard. This was exactly what my blueprints were crying out for. The missing piece. The holy grail of my manufacturing revolution. Serena's first instinct was classic Serena. How much do they cost? I'll buy them. If money doesn't work, I'll trade product shares. Whatever the price, I'm bringing them north. Then Marcus ruined everything with 4 terrible words. They're not slaves. Record scratch. Freeze frame. Not slaves. Not imprisoned. Not even slightly unhappy. Turns out they're living as honored guests of Count Valerius, a southern noble who controls the Tulip Domain. And this Valerius guy isn't your typical mouth-breathing aristocrat. He studied at the Imperial Royal Academy. He's an enlightened art and craftsmanship fanatic. A connoisseur. 10 years ago, Balin's family got exiled from their mountain clan due to internal political drama. They nearly starved to death in some southern swamp. Valerius found them, took them in, and instead of slapping chains on their necks like every other southern noble would have, he built them their own private forge. Best equipment in the entire South. Unlimited dark rye beer. All-you-can-eat roasted meat. Complete personal freedom. They just have to occasionally make some fancy weapons for the Count's guards or whip up cool gadgets he can show off at dinner parties. In exchange, they live better than most barons. That's not captivity. That's retirement. Serena went quiet for a long time after hearing this, which, if you know my sister, basically means her brain was running at 10,000% trying to solve an unsolvable puzzle. If they were miserable slaves, she had 100 ways to extract them. Money, threats, midnight raids, forged freedom papers, the whole toolkit. But these dwarves had everything. Comfort, respect, safety, beer. Why on earth would they abandon a warm southern paradise to come hammer metal in my frozen wasteland? Buying out the Count was equally hopeless. Valerius is rich, powerful, and genuinely values these dwarves. He wouldn't sell them for any amount. They're his pride and joy, not inventory. Kidnapping? That means war with the entire Tulip Domain. Serena's smart enough to know that starting a military conflict 300 miles deep in enemy territory while our trade routes are still being established would be catastrophically stupid. Marcus carefully suggested maybe they should find different dwarfs. My sister turned around with the look of a predator who just spotted something rare and magnificent, and apparently said, "The word give up doesn't exist in my dictionary. Everyone has something they can't refuse. If gold and status won't move them, Then we need to figure out what these dwarves actually care about. Reading that line, I just shook my head and laughed. Somewhere in the south, for perfectly content dwarves were drinking beer by a warm forge, completely unaware that the most dangerous negotiator on the continent had just locked onto them like a hawk spotting a rabbit. I almost feel sorry for them. Almost. A few days later, Serena's letter arrived by Express Hawk, and it was brilliant. Let me explain what she figured out. Marcus had bribed a manor steward to secretly borrow the Count's newest showpiece, a repeating hand crossbow that Balin's family had built. It was supposed to be Valerius's big flex at next month's Southern Aristocrat Art Salon. Serena examined it under 3 high-powered lanterns with a magnifying glass, and even she had to admit the craftsmanship was insane. Mirror-polished metal without a single visible flaw. Internal gear mechanisms that clicked together like music. When you pulled the trigger lever, the gears sang like a fine instrument. Zero friction, zero roughness, pure mechanical perfection. Marcus was drooling. This is what a dwarf grandmaster can do. If we had this kind of precision. But my sister, and this is why I love her, wasn't impressed. She was disappointed. Look at the actual design, Marcus. Is this fancy crossbow really more deadly than the mass-produced steel crossbows our Iron Guard carries? Marcus stopped drooling and actually thought about it. And then he saw it too. Beautiful craftsmanship. Terrible engineering. The firing mechanism was still just an old-fashioned bowstring. The gear system was needlessly complicated. Somebody had stuck decorative gold plating everywhere, which added dead weight. On an actual muddy battlefield, 1 grain of sand in those pretty little gears, and this masterpiece becomes an expensive paperweight. They have God-given hands, Serena said, but their brains are stuck in the past. And suddenly, she understood everything. Balin's family had spent 10 years in luxury, but they'd been building the wrong things. Valerius is a great host, sure, but he's still just a traditional noble. The most exciting project he can offer is, make me a sharper sword, or build me a fancier toy for my dinner party. For a grandmaster craftsman, that's like asking Michelangelo to paint fences. Serena had toured my workshops. She'd seen my blueprints, those massive, ugly, smoke-belching machines that lift tons of steel with steam power. She'd seen the design for guns that use explosive force to push metal through rifled barrels fast enough to shatter supernatural shields. Compared to that, Balin was spending his golden years carving a plastic flower in a mud puddle. 10 years of comfort. 10 years of his skills gathering dust on pointless luxury items. A grandmaster reduced to making expensive toys for a rich man's cocktail parties. For a true craftsman, Serena wrote, the worst suffering isn't poverty. It's having no blueprints worthy of their lifetime of skill. Balin has money. He has respect. But his talent has been standing still for a decade. He must feel hollow. He must feel his gift being wasted, 1 golden crossbow at a time. Then came the request that made me grin so wide my face hurt. Send me the half-finished steam engine cylinder blueprint. And one of the broken flintlock pistol prototypes. Express delivery. Maximum secrecy. Her plan? Don't buy the dragon with gold. Don't chain the lion with force. Just toss 2 pieces of technology from the future in front of a starving genius and watch what happens. Show Balin a machine that breathes fire and moves by itself. Show him a metal tube that uses explosions to punch holes through magical armor. Show him engineering so far beyond anything he's ever imagined that his comfortable retirement suddenly feels like a prison. I want him to see what real miracles look like, she wrote. I want him on his knees, begging me to take him to the place where iron breathes fire and machines roar. Reading that letter in my study, I burst out laughing, then immediately started packing the cylinder blueprints and selecting the least damaged pistol prototype. My sister figured out what I would have figured out. You don't recruit a master craftsman with money. You recruit them with problems worth solving. Also, I couldn't help noticing the way she described her plan, all dramatic and grandiose with fire metaphors. She sounded exactly like me. The family resemblance is getting scary. While I was back home babysitting road construction and yelling at Copperham about gun barrels, my sister was conquering the ocean. She'd moved east to Whalebone Harbor, one of the South's busiest ports. A chaotic mess of seawalls, oak masts, and approximately 900 taverns that all smell like spilled beer and regret. The ships docked there looked impressive if you'd never seen anything better, but Serena, who'd toured my industrial workshops, saw them for what they were, floating wooden coffins held together by tar-soaked rags and prayers. No cannons, just oversized crossbows bolted to the deck and wooden catapults for throwing fire jars. One decent storm, and these mighty vessels turn into driftwood. Charming. Marcus had already rented a 3-story stone building right next to the main docks and hung a shiny new sign. Nightingale Trading Company, Southern Headquarters. 20 gold coins for prime waterfront real estate. My sister doesn't mess around. Meanwhile, old Cavendish back in Ragetide City was apparently laughing himself silly over his lantern profits, using every connection he had to push our products deeper south. The beautiful idiot didn't realize he was just building our distribution network for us, free of charge. Serena let him enjoy his little victory. Lanterns and coal briquettes are great money, but the tech barrier is low. Southern nobles will eventually reverse-engineer decent copies. Those products were always just the door opener, the foot in the door. The real weapon was locked in an iron safe on the 3rd floor, guarded around the clock by 5 iron guard soldiers with orders to kill anyone who approached without Serena's personal authorization. 100 navigation compasses, made under my direct supervision. Special magnetized stone, high-clarity glass, the single most valuable piece of technology in the entire Southern Hemisphere. And Serena's rule about them was absolute. Lanterns can be wholesaled to anyone. Slap whatever family crest on them. She doesn't care. But compasses? Every single unit gets hand-delivered by Nightingale staff. Every buyer's ship name, route, and captain's identity gets recorded. No exceptions. No middlemen. Ever. Marcus didn't get it at first. Wouldn't we make more money faster if we let the big shipping families distribute them? Oh, sweet innocent Marcus. Serena laid it out over a sea chart. Southern sailors currently navigate by star readers, guys who look at the sky and guess. When storms or fog roll in, they're blind. 3 out of 10 ships never come home during bad weather. The annual wealth lost to ships vanishing into fog could buy half of Ragetide City. Our compass is literally a second life for every captain who owns one. And that's why we never hand the leash to someone else, Serena explained. Sell the compass to Cavendish or the Sterlings, and they become the new Sea Kings. Then they turn around and bite us whenever they feel like it. But if we control every compass, the Nightingale Trading Company becomes the lighthouse of the entire southern shipping industry. Her exact words, reportedly delivered while leaning back in her chair like a crime boss. I want every proud captain and greedy noble to understand that whether they survive the next storm doesn't depend on God's mercy or how big their sails are. It depends on whether they follow Nightingale rules. 100 compasses. 100 leashes on the most powerful people in southern maritime trade. Not a product, a control system. Since we didn't have military muscle down south yet, my guns were still being prototyped. That stone building was our fortress, and the compasses were our army. Pure leverage. Then she sent out dinner invitations. 3 of Whalebone Harbor's most famous, free captains, and Baron Eric of the Seasong family. The pitch? The Nightingale Trading Company is hosting a miracle banquet tonight at the Blue Tavern. We have something that will free you from your star reader's extortion forever. Extortion. She called the traditional navigation system extortion. In the invitation, that people would read before dinner. My sister doesn't open doors. She kicks them down, walks in wearing heels, and somehow makes everyone inside thank her for the renovation. Serena's field reports were getting so good I started reading them with snacks. Picture this. Whalebone Harbor at dusk, completely swallowed by fog so thick you could spread it on toast. Every ship chained to the dock, because sailing in that soup is basically writing your own obituary. Captains paying through the nose in docking fees because the alternative is dying. Inside the Blue Tavern's VIP room, roaring fireplace, roasted lamb legs, spiced fish, expensive dwarf beer, sat the guest list. 3 free captains and 1 desperate nobleman, all waiting for my sister to blow their minds. Bartholomew was the loudest. Built like a wardrobe, covered in scars, smelled like seal oil, commanded 3 ocean-going ships. The kind of guy who punches sharks for fun. Baron Eric of the Seasong family was the saddest. His family spent 3 generations building a shipping empire, then lost 5 ships in one fog bank a few months ago. Cargo, crew, everything, gone into the mist like they never existed. Now he's drowning in debt, weeks away from loan sharks repossessing his house and his last 2 boats. He showed up tonight because he literally had nothing left to lose. The other two captains were somewhere between skeptical and hopeless. Life on the southern seas meant paying outrageous fees to star readers, glorified fortune tellers who squint at the sky and charge you a kidney for it. And the moment clouds roll in for 2 weeks straight, these so-called navigators are just as blind as everyone else. Then Serena walked in. Black riding outfit, purple cloak. The room straightened up like soldiers at inspection without anyone telling them to. No small talk. She snapped her fingers. Marcus set a black ebony box on the table and clicked it open. Everyone leaned in and saw a palm-sized brass disc with a tiny red-tipped needle floating in the center. Some numbers and symbols around the edge on white parchment. That's it. That's the miracle. Bartholomew burst out laughing. Actually laughed. In my sister's face. This is your replacement for star readers? A little needle? Should we put it in a lady's jewelry box? Are we supposed to follow this needle's mood through a hurricane to find land? Even Eric's hopeful expression dimmed. He was clearly thinking, great, another mainlander who doesn't understand the ocean. Serena's smile didn't waver. If anything, it got wider. Which, if these men knew her at all, should have terrified them. Captain Bartholomew, experience is a sailor's greatest treasure. But sometimes it becomes a cage over your eyes. She picked up the compass in her gloved hand, turned toward the window where the fog was so dense it looked like someone had filled the harbor with warm milk, and said, your star readers can't see a thing right now. They're probably in church praying. So how about a bet? The room went dead silent. Right now? This fog. We take this little toy, get in an unmarked rowboat, paddle 3 miles out into deep open water with no landmarks, no star reader, no lighthouse, and if I can't bring everyone back alive using nothing but this needle, she locked eyes with every man at the table. I'll give Baron Eric 1,000 gold coins and permanently leave Whalebone Harbor, 1,000 gold coins. On a fog night where going 3 miles out is basically a suicide pact with the ocean. Bartholomew's laughter died. His pupils shrank. Every survival instinct in his salt-crusted body was screaming that this was insane. Nobody goes to open water in this fog. Nobody. Not the bravest captain. Not the craziest drunk. But this woman just offered to do it with a brass disc and a needle. What does she know that they don't? Bartholomew slammed his fist on the table. Fine. I'll go with you. His eyes were half terrified, half electric with the kind of wild hope that only a man who's watched too many friends disappear into. Fog can feel. If that needle does what you say, my entire fleet follows Nightingale from this day forward, reading this report in my warm study with my hot cocoa. I thought, those men have no idea that in about 2 hours, a tiny magnetized needle is going to rearrange the entire power structure of southern maritime trade. And my sister is going to do it from a rowboat. In the dark. In fog you can't see through. The Wisteria family really doesn't do things small. When Serena's report about the fog test arrived, I had to put down my cocoa and just applaud. Alone. In my study. Like a crazy person. So picture this. One tiny rowboat. For people. Fog so thick you could chew it. Paddling into open ocean at night, like absolute lunatics. 200 meters out, harbor lights gone. Everything in every direction, identical gray nothing. No landmarks. No stars. No wind pattern you could trust. Just water, fog, and the growing certainty that you've made a terrible life decision. Bartholomew, this mountain of a man, who punches the ocean for a living, was white-knuckling the boat rail, so hard his veins looked ready to explode. Baron Eric was shaking like a wet kitten, begging them to stop before they passed the point of no return. Serena? Sitting there like she was on a pleasure cruise. 2 miles out, she told Marcus to stop rowing. The boat drifted in silence. Then she asked Bartholomew to guess which direction the harbor was. The old sea dog closed his eyes, listened to the waves, used 30 years of maritime instinct, pointed confidently to his back left. Serena smiled and held up the compass. The red needle was pointing 90 degrees away from his guess, not a little off, perpendicular. His legendary sailor gut was completely, catastrophically wrong. This needle always points to the extreme magnetic north, she told them, her voice floating through the fog like a ghost. If north is fixed, then south, east, and west become math. And math doesn't get confused by fog. Turn the boat southwest by south. 15 minutes. You'll see the lighthouse. Bartholomew stared at that stubborn little red needle, and I can only imagine the tidal wave crashing through his brain. With this device, his ships could sail in any weather. Skip the dangerous coastal routes. Cut straight through deep water on direct lines that star readers call suicide zones. Half the fuel costs. 10 times the survival rate. He dropped to his knees in the rowboat, which, in a tiny boat on open ocean, is a bold move, and called my compass a demon's eye. Then he screamed to turn the boat around. 15 minutes later, the white stone lighthouse materialized out of the fog dead ahead, exactly where the needle said it would be. Eric broke down crying. Not from relief, from hope. He suddenly saw his bankrupt family rising from the ashes. Saw every moneylender and rival family who'd been circling his corpse getting crushed under the weight of absolute navigational superiority. Back at the tavern, the mood had done a complete backflip. Bartholomew and the other captains were standing at attention like soldiers. Eric was on one knee with his hand over his heart. "Name your price," Bartholomew bellowed. 100 gold? 200? "I'll give you half my flagship's profits for 3 years, everything I have left," Eric cried. "Warehouses, docks, take it all." These men, kings of the southern sea, hardened veterans who'd spat in the face of storms, were practically throwing their wallets at my sister. Serena swirled her wine and smiled the smile of a woman who just won a game her opponents didn't know they were playing. "I told you, it's not for sale." Their faces went white. You could have heard a pin drop on cotton. However, she let that word hang in the air like a blade. "Nightingale will lease compasses to our most loyal allies. 50 gold per year, per unit. In exchange, our cargo gets shipping priority on your vessels. And every scrap of intelligence you pick up in every port, noble movements, commodity prices, political shifts, goes straight to a Nightingale office." First, Bartholomew didn't even hesitate. Done. No negotiation. No counteroffer. A man who'd laughed at a little needle an hour ago just signed away his fleet's independence without blinking, and looked grateful for the opportunity. Reading this in my study, I leaned back and just let it sink in. My sister didn't sell compasses. She created a subscription service for survival. 50 gold a year for the privilege of not dying at sea, with a side of mandatory intelligence gathering and cargo priority. She'd turned 100 brass discs into a monopoly over the entire southern maritime industry. Every captain who leases a compass becomes a Nightingale agent. Every port they visit becomes a Nightingale listening post. Every ship becomes a Nightingale cargo carrier. Not a trade deal. An empire. And this was just phase 1. The money and intelligence flowing through this network would fund her real mission, getting those dwarf masters from Tulip Domain and buying up rare materials I need for advanced manufacturing. My sister went south to open a trade route and accidentally became the invisible queen of the ocean. I raised my cocoa mug to the empty room. To Serena, the most terrifying person in our family, and that's saying something. Serena's report about meeting Balin was the single most entertaining piece of mail I have ever received. I wish I could have been a fly on that forge wall. So my sister bribed her way past the Count's security, just casually committed what would technically be a capital offense, and walked into a master dwarf's private workshop like she owned the place. Balin Steelforge, former chief grandmaster of ancient runic maintenance, currently screaming at his apprentice sons at the top of his lungs because their metal temperature was off. "Are you feeling the heat with your toes? The Count wants armor-piercing spikes, not toothpicks for noble ladies." Charming fellow, built like a fire hydrant with a red braided beard that literally dragged on the floor, covered in coal dust and fury. The kind of guy whose default emotional setting is volcanic eruption. He didn't even turn around when Serena walked in. Just felt her presence and immediately threatened to smash her skull with an 80-pound forging hammer. "You have 10 seconds to leave before I crack that pretty head open." My sister didn't flinch. She pulled her hood down, looked this raging dwarf murder machine in the eye, and said the most provocative thing possible. "I'm here to rescue your talent from rotting in this luxury prison." Balin laughed so hard his beard shed cold dust. "Rescue me? Look around. I have the finest charcoal on the continent. Mithril, or that human kings would kill for. Every weapon I make gets worshipped as a family heirloom." Serena went straight for the jugular. "Family heirloom? You mean that toy crossbow outside? The one stuffed with useless decorative gears that couldn't kill an armored pig?" The laughter died. She kept cutting. Admit it, master. You have everything material. But you've lost your soul. Every day you build pretty trinkets for a nobleman's cocktail party. Your hands were meant to forge things that change how the world works. Instead, you're carving plastic flowers in a mud puddle. Balin's face turned the color of his forge. He grabbed his hammer and charged. Marcus nearly drew his sword. My sister didn't even blink. Look at this before you kill me. She tossed a wooden box at his feet. Inside, my steam engine cylinder blueprints and the busted flintlock pistol that saved my life. Balin stopped mid-swing. The blueprint hit him first. His master craftsman eyes locked onto the technical drawings, the geometric cross-sections, the precision measurements, the mechanical logic so tight it made his brain catch fire. He'd worked with ancient runic machinery before, but he'd never seen engineering like this. What? What is this thing? He dropped his hammer like it was made of paper, wiped his hands on his shirt, then picked up my cylinder blueprint like it was a holy relic, hands trembling. It's called a cylinder, Serena purred in her best demonic temptress voice. It converts steam pressure from boiling water into unlimited mechanical force. An industrial heart. If you can forge the inner walls to within 0.01 millimeters of tolerance, it produces the pulling power of 100 warhorses. No magic, no supernatural energy, just steel and physics. Balin's eyes went bloodshot. His pupils were practically vibrating as they traced every line, every measurement, every notation on that blueprint. 10 years of mental hibernation ended in 1 second. His brain rebooted like a machine that had been unplugged for a decade. Then he picked up my pistol, shoved his nose right into the barrel, sniffed the gunpowder residue like fine wine, ran his fingers along the rifling grooves inside, using sealed combustion to maximize projectile velocity. This is brutally simple, but it perfectly follows force mechanics. Impossible, then, and this is the part that made me simultaneously proud and offended. He started trashing Copperham's craftsmanship. The blacksmith who made this is a complete amateur. The alloy ratio is wrong. The internal stress wasn't released. No wonder it nearly exploded after one shot. In this blueprint, the tolerances required are impossible with human machine tools. This is just fantasy on paper. Hey buddy, that amateur is my best craftsman. But also, yeah, that's literally why we need you. Serena pounced. That's exactly why I'm here. My lord has the mind of a god, but no hands to match. These blueprints are impossible for humans. But for a Highland dwarf grandmaster, surely they're not impossible for you. Nonsense. There is nothing in this world that Balin Steel Forge cannot forge. He clutched the blueprint and pistol to his chest like a mother protecting her children, glaring at Serena like she might try to take them back. Hook, line, sinker. He refused to come north. Of course he refused. He's a dwarf. They'd rather eat their own beard than admit someone convinced them of anything. But he demanded to keep the blueprints and the gun so he could prove whether this is a real miracle or just some lord's fever dream, which is exactly what Serena wanted. She curtsied like a proper noble lady, put her hood back on, and left him with the most perfectly placed parting shot. When you see steam move steel with your own eyes, you'll know where you truly belong. Reading this report, I leaned back and grinned at the ceiling. My sister just planted a bomb inside a genius dwarf's brain, lit the fuse, and walked away. Balin thinks he's testing whether my designs work. What he's actually doing is falling in love with industrial engineering, one prototype at a time. And when he finally builds that cylinder and watches steam push a piston for the first time, he'll be packing for the north before the metal cools. Also, I'm choosing not to be offended that he called Copperham an amateur. He's right, but still, rude. When Serena's next report arrived, I stopped laughing. The southern waters were deeper and darker than either of us had estimated. And my sister had just learned that lesson the hard way. 3 days after her secret visit to Balin's forge, Count Valerius figured everything out. The manor steward she'd bribed? The Count pulled out his fingernails and threw him to the hunting dogs. Medieval aristocrats don't mess around with employee discipline. 200 soldiers in full tulip domain armor surrounded the White Gull Tavern like a black iron tide. Every merchant and mercenary inside went dead silent. The kind of silence where people forget how to breathe. Then they kicked down Serena's door. Literally. One blast of third-tier battle aura turned solid oak into splinters. Marcus and the Iron Guard boys drew their weapons instantly, shielding Serena behind them. But against a hallway packed with heavy crossbowmen, a few swords might as well have been toothpicks. Valerius walked in wearing a blood-stained hunting outfit, carrying a barbed riding crop. Not his usual cultured gentleman look. This was, I just tortured someone, and I'm still in the mood, energy. So the famous Nightingale Trading Company succeeds in the South through rules and reputation, he said with a smile that had absolutely zero warmth in it. Yet here you are, sneaking into MY backyard, trying to steal MY most prized craftsman with scraps of paper. Serena tried the diplomatic approach. I merely admired Master Balin's work and wanted to. Crack. The barbed whip slashed the tea table into pieces. Wood exploded everywhere. A splinter cut a thin line of blood across my sister's cheek. Shut up. Don't try the tricks that worked on that idiot Cavendish. You have zero negotiating power here. He told her the bribed steward had confessed everything. This wasn't a business dispute anymore. This was a territorial predator who'd caught someone touching his things. Seize her. Kill anyone who resists. Crossbows leveled at every person in the room. Death was one twitchy finger away. Marcus was ready to die fighting. His hand was steady on his sword, calculating how many seconds he could buy for Serena to escape. The answer, against 200 elite soldiers, was approximately not enough. My sister wiped the blood off her face, swallowed every ounce of pride in her body, and played her survival card. If I die here, you'll never get another navigation compass. And Ashwood's retaliation won't be something you can shrug off. Are you threatening me? I'm offering compensation. Then she gave away something that made my stomach drop when I read it. Half of the compass exclusive leasing rights across the entire South. For 5 years. Free of charge. Handed to the Tulip family. That's one of our biggest future revenue streams. Just gone. Surrendered at whip point in a hotel room. The Count's killing intent flickered. He's a spice trader at heart. He understood exactly what compass monopoly rights meant. His family could swallow rival shipping houses whole. 30 seconds of silence that probably felt like 30 years. He lowered the whip. Acceptable compensation. I'll let you live. Your business in the South can continue. Then he stepped close to Serena, so close only she could hear, and delivered what I can only describe as the most threatening whisper in commercial history. Balin's family lives and dies in MY territory. If you go near that forge again, or try any trick to move them south, the next delivery to Ashwood will be your head in a salt jar. My sister agreed. She had no choice. She nodded, said the contract would arrive tomorrow, and watched 200 soldiers flow out of the tavern like a retreating tide. When Marcus looked at the wreckage and said they'd paid too much, Serena opened her eyes, and the woman looking back at him wasn't broken or humiliated. She was furious. The cold, patient, calculating kind of furious that ends dynasties. You think that Count can keep a lid on dwarves who've seen the truth? She walked to the shattered window and watched his army march away. Dwarf masters are more stubborn than the mountains they come from. The Count's bullying today will only make Balin despise him more. Just another brainless noble who solves everything with force, once Balin builds that steam cylinder. Once he watches physics move steel without magic. He'll know that only one place in this world deserves his talent. He'll smash down his own workshop door and walk to Ashwood on his own 2 feet. She clenched her fist so hard her nails drew blood from her palm. And the things I gave away today? They're just temporarily stored at the Count's house. When Lorien's guns can be mass-produced, I'm coming back with the Iron Guard. And I will take back everything, with interest. Today's humiliation gets repaid tenfold. Reading that last line, alone in my study, I set down the report very carefully. Then I walked to my workshop, found Copperham, and told him the gun production timeline just got moved up. Nobody whips my sister's face and keeps their teeth. Nobody threatens to salt jar her head and sleeps peacefully. The Count thinks he won today. He has no idea he just started a countdown on his own destruction. Serena plays the long game. And so do I. We're coming back, Valerius. And we're bringing more than contracts next time. So the dwarf surprise was dead. Serena's report made that painfully clear. The Count had her cornered. She had to surrender half our compass leasing rights just to walk out alive, and Balin's family was locked down tighter than ever. But my sister isn't the type to mope. When life slams a door in her face, she doesn't knock again. She goes and buys the entire building next door. Since she couldn't bring home dwarf masters, she decided to buy literally everything else the South had to offer and stuff it into wagons heading north. First, she unleashed her remaining cash reserves on the underground black markets like a woman possessed. The Abyss Market, a lovely establishment where sunlight goes to die and the air smells like rot, cheap potions, and poor life choices. Serena walked through wearing a silver half-mask and flanked by 10 armed Iron Guard soldiers, looking like the final boss of a heist movie. Marcus rattled off the shopping list: deep-sea blue blood silver, fire salamander venom sacks, 3 entire crates of shadow grass from southern swamps, rare alchemical ingredients that simply don't exist up north. With these materials, the Ed Brothers lab could boost our explosive compounds by 2 full grades. My blueprints have been starving for better chemistry, and Serena just bought the entire grocery store. Next, combat assets. Specifically, she remembered how a certain 4th-tier assassin nearly turned me into a historical footnote and decided to fix that problem permanently. Marcus had avoided the big dumb orc laborers and focused on something much more useful: rainforest wolfkin. 15 of them, crammed into an iron cage, covered in gray and silver fur, watching the world with suspicious yellow eyes. No supernatural powers, useless in a straight fight, but their sense of smell and hearing? Multiple times sharper than any human scout. A 4th-tier assassin trying to sneak past these guys would be like trying to tiptoe past a room full of smoke detectors while on fire. Buy them all, Serena ordered. Tell them, serve Ashwood loyally and they'll be freed. Full civilian status. Regular meals. She understood what I've always known. A full stomach and basic dignity are stronger chains than any iron collar. These wolfkin would be my early warning system against assassins. No more bendy spine monsters sneaking up on me while I'm trying to look cool. Then Serena spotted something in a smaller golden cage nearby, and this is where my dear sister's brain went somewhere I was not prepared. 4. 2 fox-girl demi-humans. Small, fluffy ears, enormous bushy tails, terrified out of their minds, clinging to each other like the world was ending. In the South, these foxkin are basically kept as, let's say, entertainment by degenerate nobles. These 2 had clearly been through hell. Marcus tried to talk sense. Miss, foxkin have 0 combat ability. They're too fragile to even work a textile loom. They're completely useless. Serena gave him a look that said, "You sweet, naive man," and launched into her reasoning. Foxkin have sensory perception as sharp as wolfkin, maybe sharper for poisons and dangerous scents. More importantly, they're detail-oriented and pleasant to look at. Then she spelled out her actual plan, and I quote from the report: buy them. Train them in loyalty protocols and anti-assassination techniques. Then install them in the Lord's manor. Teach them to brew tea, organize blueprints, and give Lorien massages. I'm sorry, what? Marcus apparently made the exact face I made reading this. You want them to serve the Lord personally. Lorien is Ashwood's brain. His mind is worth more than 10,000 soldiers. Sylvie is loyal and strong, but she's a knight. She doesn't know how to take care of someone's daily needs. These foxgirls will officially be personal maids. Unofficially, they're the last line of defense around my brother. If they do their job well, the Wisteria family will give them all the dignity they deserve. So to summarize, my big sister went south to open trade routes, conquered the maritime industry, got whipped in the face by a count, nearly died, gave away half our compass rights under duress, failed to recruit legendary dwarf craftsmen, and then on her way home decided to buy me. Foxgirl bodyguard maids, who will brew my tea, organize my paperwork, and give me massages, while also being trained assassin detectors. I don't even know what emotion I'm feeling right now. Gratitude? Embarrassment? Fear of what Sylvie will do when 2 fluffy-tailed girls show up at the manor? All 3. The caravan headed north loaded with rare alchemical materials, wolfkin scouts, foxgirl maid bodyguards, and one extremely determined sister who was already mentally planning her revenge tour against Count Valerius. This trip cost us dearly. The compass rights loss hurts, but the materials alone will push our tech tree up a full tier. The wolf can solve my assassins sneaking through my camp problem, and the fox girl solve a problem I didn't know I had. Actually, I still don't think I have that problem. But try telling Serena that. The 3rd spring rain finally stopped, and I was standing on my 3rd-floor balcony watching Ashwood steam dry in the sunshine like a giant wet dog. The town had officially cracked 100,000 people. 100,000. I went from managing a frozen garbage dump to running a small city. Life comes at you fast. Barl, road progress. My ancient butler flipped open his notebook at elderly speed. Main highways, done. Branch roads to Yellow Cedar. Gravel laid, ready for concrete. The route to Winterhold has to go around a mountain, so that's going to take a while. Route it through White River first, I decided. Southern cargo volume is about to explode. Water transport will be the backbone, but we need a backup land route in case something goes sideways. Serena was there too, fiddling with some trinket she'd brought back from the south. She looked at my road plans and raised an eyebrow. You keep talking about paving the entire north. But go further north and it's permafrost. Go east, and there's a mountain range nobody's ever crossed. At some point the return on investment drops to zero. I walked over to the map, our newest one, hand-drawn, by Iron Guard scouts who'd walked every corner of the territory. South leads deeper into the Empire and toward the southern kingdoms. North is labeled Polar Frozen Wasteland, goes on forever. West has a bit of coastline marked Storm Sea, and east? Just blank, white space stretching to the edge of the parchment. In one tiny corner, someone had scribbled, Mist Mountains, uninhabited. I traced the mountain outline with my finger. How tall are these mountains? What's on the other side? Sylvie, standing in the doorway like the world's most lethal doorstop, chimed in helpfully. It traveling. Bard once saying that beyond the eastern mountains is where the sun rises, and dragons and phoenixes live there. She paused. Though he was mostly trying to scam free drinks, so? Take that with a grain of salt. Maybe not all of it is lies, I murmured. The Empire's official maps never draw anything east. That either means there's nothing worth conquering, or nobody's survived to report back. Or, and this is the interesting option, there's something out there that the Empire simply doesn't know about. Old Barl frowned. You're not thinking of sending people over those mountains, my lord? That's hundreds of miles of wilderness. Even experienced hunters won't go in there. Before I could answer, Serena dropped a bombshell. I heard something in the south. Fragmentary, but interesting. She set down her trinket. A ship captain from Dawn Harbor said that in his youth, his fleet sailed around the southern continent and found people on an eastern landmass. Yellow skin, black hair. Their porcelain was thinner than the finest imperial ceramics. Their swords had strange writing carved into the blades. My heart did a very specific thing. He wanted to trade, but port officials turned him away. Very isolationist, apparently. He was quite disappointed about not establishing commerce. Yellow skin, black hair, I repeated, keeping my voice carefully neutral. He said they called themselves something like the Nation of the Rising Sun, Zhou, or something similar, Zhou. My brain went completely silent for about 3 seconds while my past life's memories hit me like a freight train. But I caught myself immediately. This isn't my old world. It can't be my homeland. Different universe, different rules. Whatever, Zhou, civilization exists on this continent's eastern side. It's not China. Probably. Almost certainly. Definitely maybe not. If we can confirm their level of civilization, I said with forced calm, we might open an entirely new trade route. Sylvie straightened up. Want me to send a scouting party over the mountains? No. Too risky. We don't even know if there's drinking water on the other side, let alone how dangerous the terrain is. Have intelligence gather every scrap of information about those mountains first. Old hunters, old maps, old legends, everything. Then, because the universe apparently has a sense of comedic timing, a soldier came running upstairs. My lord, the Eastern Patrol found several strangers at the edge of the mountain forest. Strange clothes, unknown language. The captain didn't dare make a call, so he brought them in. How many? Armed, 2 women, 1 man. Wearing torn silk. No iron weapons, just a few short knives. The man has injuries. Looks like he fell while crossing the mountains. He paused. The captain says their faces look different from normal people. Round features. Yellow skin. The room went dead quiet for 2 full seconds. Serena whipped her head toward me, eyes wide. That captain from Dawn Harbor said, I was already moving. Bring them to the reception hall. Don't frighten them. Get Cecilia here for the injured one. And raise alert to level 2. Sylvie fell into step behind me. You think they're armed scouts? Could be refugees. Either way, opening the front door is more dignified than peeking through the keyhole. I walked out of the manor into the rain-damp air. The stones were still wet, and everything smelled like earth and fresh leaves. I looked east toward those half-hidden mountains lurking under the clouds, and one thought floated through my mind in a language nobody on this continent would understand. Well, speak of the devil, and the devil shows up on your doorstep wearing torn silk and carrying short knives. The blank eastern edge of my map was about to get a whole lot more interesting. Now, I didn't learn the full story until much later, after we got translators involved and pieced together months of broken conversations, gestures, and a lot of pointing at drawings. But here's what happened on the other side of those mountains, 3 days before my patrol found them. The Great Zhou Dynasty, 17th year of Emperor Yongchang's reign. The Imperial Palace. There was a princess, Li Jinshu, Princess Yong'an, 17 years old, youngest daughter of the emperor. 3 months earlier, she'd been the pampered golden child of the palace. Could paint, play music, write poetry, do calligraphy, the whole classical princess package. Then everything went sideways. Some general called the Northern Garrison King launched a rebellion. The prime minister, a delightful fellow named Zhao Chongxian, used the chaos as an excuse to purge absolutely everyone he didn't like. The empress's relatives? Prison. The crown prince's tutors? Prison. Rival princes? You guessed it. Prison. And Princess Yong'an's crime? 3 years ago, at a formal spring banquet, she'd sewn a scented pouch as a ceremonial gift for the rebel general's son. A standard courtesy gift that she'd made for every young noble at the party. But Zhao didn't need evidence. He just needed an excuse. The emperor was bedridden, barely alive. The imperial seal was basically Zhao's personal stamp at this point. He wrote a death warrant for the princess in the time it takes to finish a cup of tea. Luckily, a loyal palace guard captain smuggled out warning. The princess's handmaid, Ah Yuan, and 2 bodyguards broke her out through an abandoned sewer tunnel under the palace. Glamorous. They couldn't run south. Zhao's forces had every southern route locked down. Going to any regional lord meant walking into a trap. So this 17-year-old princess looked west at the Mist Mountains, a 1,000-mile wall of ice and rock that even experienced hunters refused to enter, and said 3 words, "Cross the mountains." Her handmaid nearly fainted. "Your Highness, hunters say nobody can get through. Stay here, and we're dead. Zhao won't spare anyone with the surname Li. Even a wasteland is better than a beautiful cage." And they went into the mountains. In winter. Day 3. A landslide took their last 2 pack horses. Day 7. One of the 2 bodyguards slipped on an ice cliff and fell to his death. The princess covered his eyes with a scarf, pressed her hand to his forehead, then took his knife and fire striker and kept walking. "Can we make it out?" Ah Yuan asked, face purple from cold, lips cracked and bleeding. Li Jinshu gripped her broken, bleeding fingernails around the knife handle and didn't stop moving. "Yes, 3 more days. Food gone. Half a canteen of crushed ice." They reached the final mountain pass, a ridge so narrow and sharp it was like walking on a giant knife blade, wind howling from both sides hard enough to knock them off their feet. And on the other side, green, fresh leaves glowing in afternoon sunlight. Forest stretching as far as they could see. Trees, Ah Yuan choked out, tears streaming. "The trees are green. It's not frozen." The princess bent over, hands on knees, gasping. She looked back at the silver mountains behind her. Her father was probably dead by now. Zhao was probably sitting on the throne. Everything she'd known was gone. But she was alive. They stumbled down the slope for half a day, supporting each other, and reached the forest edge at dusk. Then they heard hoofbeats. Pursuers. Ah Yuan grabbed the princess's sleeve in terror. Li Jinshu drew her short knife and stood in front of her exhausted companions. She could barely hold the blade. The wounded bodyguard could barely stand. If these were enemies, they were dead. Riders emerged from the trees, and they looked like nothing she'd ever seen. Full steel plate armor, not the layered iron scales of Zhou soldiers, but single sheets of polished steel that gleamed white in the fading light. Face-covering helmets, crossbows on their saddles, long-handled war swords at their hips. My guys, my Eastern Patrol, looking absolutely terrifying to 3 half-dead refugees who'd never seen Western-style armor in their lives. The patrol leader stopped his horse and stared down at them. Young face, deep-set features, pale skin, everything about him screamed, alien, to someone from Zhou. He said something. Short syllables, weird intonation. She didn't understand a single word. She took a deep breath, spread her arms wide, and said as slowly as possible, "I mean, no harm." The patrol leader tilted his head, muttered something to his buddy, then dismounted. Mayday, follow me. Gesture. No attempt to disarm them. No violence. No aggression. Li Jinshu did the math in her head. If these guys wanted to kill 3 starving, half-frozen people, 15 horsemen could trample them flat without breaking stride. No need for tricks. She sheathed her knife. Nodded. And that's how a fugitive princess of the great Zhou dynasty walked into my territory, carrying nothing but a short blade, a dead man's fire striker, and what turned out to be one of the most valuable brains I'd ever encounter. But I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew, standing in my reception hall waiting for them to arrive, was that the blank eastern edge of my map had just knocked on my front door, and it was wearing torn silk. I got the full story from Aiden's patrol report later, and honestly, it was fascinating watching my town through a stranger's eyes. Aiden, the patrol captain who found them, used to be a hunter from White River before joining the Iron Guard 6 months ago. Good woodland tracker, zero experience with anything exotic. He'd never seen people like this before. Round, smooth faces, hair black as crow feathers, and completely straight. Nothing like our local curly-haired folks. His only frame of reference was bar stories. Southern Island natives, mythical snake women, overseas savages. Helpful stuff, Aiden. Very scientific. The 3 guests, or prisoners, depending on who you asked, walked with his patrol for half a day toward town. 2 of them were visibly terrified. The handmaid kept clutching a small cloth bundle to her chest like it contained her soul. Aiden peeked at it once. Looked like dried grain stalks. Weird thing to die protecting, but okay. The young woman, though? The one I'd later learn was a runaway princess? She was calm. Not relaxed calm. More like, I've already accepted every possible outcome, including death, so nothing surprises me anymore. Calm. That's the most dangerous kind. When Ashwood appeared on the horizon, Aiden glanced back and saw her pupils shrink to pinpoints. Not fear, pure shock. He looked at the town and shrugged. Nothing special to him. The walls got taller and thicker again, sure, but the stonework was function over beauty as usual, because I don't waste time making things pretty when I can make them effective. The unfinished cathedral poked up with scaffolding still hanging off it. Factory smokehouse chimneys were doing their usual impression of an angry volcano. The steamroller was parked in its shed like a sleeping metal dinosaur. Pretty nice town, huh? Aiden said, then remembered she didn't speak his language and gave up. She murmured something to her handmaid in that flowing Eastern language. The maid whispered back. Aiden understood none of it and moved on. Solid communication skills all around. But here's where it gets interesting, and I'm reconstructing this from what we eventually learned through weeks of translation work. Princess Li Jinshu was studying my town like a scholar analyzing a text. Every single detail. She noticed the glass-covered street lamps mounted on the walls at regular intervals. What kind of border settlement has street lighting? She saw a public water tap on the roadside. Someone turned the handle and clean water poured out. Her eyes went wide. Running water from a wall pipe, in a frontier town, in what she'd assumed was barbaric wasteland. Her entire worldview was recalibrating in real time. She watched an old white-haired woman sitting outside her door with a wooden board displaying small iron tools and fabric scraps for sale. Next to the goods was a hand-painted sign with wobbly but legible letters. Those letters weren't Chinese. They weren't any script she recognized. But her brain immediately processed the implication. An elderly street vendor who can write. In Zhou's most prosperous southern river cities, widespread literacy among common elderly women would be remarkable. Here, in a frozen frontier settlement on the wrong side of an impassable mountain range, a grandma selling scrap metal could spell. I'm told her internal shock meter was basically exploding by this point. This town wasn't as grand as the Zhou capital. No centuries of cultural refinement, no silk-draped palaces, no jade gardens. But it had things that a capital city of millions didn't have. Clean running water on every street. Public lighting. Literate commoners. Roads that weren't made of packed dirt. This wasn't what barbarian wasteland was supposed to look like. Not even close. Meanwhile, the townspeople barely glanced at her group. A few curious looks, then back to business. Ashwood has processed so many weird arrivals in the past 2 years. Half-orcs, half-elves, runaway serfs, spies pretending to be merchants. That 3 yellow-skinned strangers in torn silk barely registered as interesting. Just another Tuesday. Aiden stopped in front of my 3-story stone headquarters. We're here. Go in. Li Jinshu looked up at the banner flying from the roof. Red background, star pattern. She didn't recognize it, but apparently thought it looked unexpectedly grand for a frontier lord's flag. She took a deep breath and walked through my front door. And I was standing inside, waiting, with hot tea prepared, a medic on standby, and approximately 10,000 questions buzzing in my brain like caffeinated bees. The blank edge of my map was about to start talking. The reception hall is small but clean. 2 maps on the wall, sunlight coming through the south window, me in the big chair, trying to look lordly. Sylvie behind me like a silver-haired attack dog on standby. Serena by the window, already sizing up our guests like merchandise. 3 people walked in. The male bodyguard was limping on a bandaged leg, but still trying to shield the women with his body. Respect. Dumb, but respect. Then I saw her. Even covered in dirt and scratches, the young woman in the middle had a face that made my brain short-circuit for half a second. Not the sharp Western angles I was used to, softer, rounder lines. Black hair tangled from days of mountain climbing. A few strands stuck to her forehead. But those eyes? Completely calm. 2 pieces of black obsidian that had clearly seen some terrible things and decided to stop being impressed by any of them. She wore a dark blue robe with gold cloud embroidery on the edges, sleeves unraveling, hem caked in mud and grass stains. But the fabric quality and needlework? That wasn't peasant clothing. That was royalty trying very hard to look like a refugee. My heart sped up. I kept my face perfectly still. I started with the standard imperial greeting. Welcome to Ashwood territory. I am Lord Lorien Wisteria. She frowned, turned to her handmaid, whispered something, and the language she whispered in nearly knocked me out of my chair. I recognized those tones, those rhythms, those sounds that I hadn't heard spoken out loud since I died in my previous life. Something cracked open inside my chest. Homesickness? Nostalgia? The bizarre, gut-punching experience of hearing sounds from a world you thought you'd never connect with again? I made a decision on the spot. Probably reckless. Definitely worth it. I leaned forward slightly, dug deep into memories I'd buried for years, and in the rustiest, most awkward pronunciation imaginable, said, "Are you from the Zhou dynasty?" The room froze. The princess's head snapped up like I'd slapped her. Her mouth fell open. Her handmaid looked at me like I'd sprouted a second head. "You." Her voice trembled. "You can speak the language of the Central Plains? Turns out the Eastern language of this world and my previous life, Chinese, are similar enough to communicate. Not identical. Some words were different. The grammar had quirks, but close enough that we could understand each other. Like finding a radio station from home, playing through static on an alien planet. My cover story. Years ago, I met an Eastern traveler. He taught me some. Total lie. But smooth enough. She studied me with those obsidian eyes for a long moment. Then she knelt. Not a desperate collapse, a formal, precise, elegant court bow. Even in her ruined clothes, the motion screamed, I was trained in a palace. I am Princess Li Jinshu of the Great Zhou dynasty, titled Yong'an. My father the emperor lies dying. A treacherous minister has seized power. I fled the capital and crossed the western mountains. I humbly beg asylum. Princess. Overthrown. Fugitive. Requesting shelter. I understood about 90% of that and filled in the rest from context. Classic political refugee scenario, except she'd crossed an impossible mountain range to get here, which elevated her from refugee to absolutely insane badass. I stood, walked over, and gestured for her to rise. Stand up. In my territory, nobody needs to kneel to talk. She hesitated, then stood, guarded but hopeful. Then she remembered something. She quickly unwrapped that cloth bundle her handmaid had been protecting with her life and spread the contents on my table. Dried grain stalks. Small, golden, plump seeds inside the husks. This is the only valuable thing I brought from the capital, she said. The finest rice variety from the imperial farms. I spent 3 years selectively breeding it. If it can grow here, 3 harvests per year, it can feed 10,000 people. I looked down at those humble little grain stalks, and my brain went absolutely nuclear. Rice. Actual rice. This continent has nothing like rice. We eat black bread, oats, potatoes, and beans. Every single day. Bread and soup. Soup and bread. Bread with meat. Meat with bread. Do you know how long it's been since I've eaten a bowl of steamed white rice? I almost fell to my knees. but I kept it together because I'm a professional. Nodded calmly. I'll have our agricultural department test plant these right away. Inside my head, rice, 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 rice. For now, rest. My servants will prepare rooms and hot baths. Treat the injuries first. We'll talk more after you've eaten. She blinked, surprised by the simple kindness, and nodded. Some of the wariness left her eyes. Then, because my life never stays calm for more than 10 minutes, a military officer burst in and whispered urgently to Sylvie. Her face hardened. She turned to me. My lord. Emergency report from the Eastern Outpost. Approximately 20 armed personnel crossed through the same mountain pass about 30 minutes ago. Mixed clothing, but high-quality weapons. They appear to be tracking someone. Li Jinshu couldn't understand Imperial language, but she could read the room. The officer's urgency. Sylvie's eyes flickering toward her. She knew exactly what this meant. Her lips pressed tight. Her fingers clenched her sleeve. I glanced at her, then said casually, like I was ordering lunch, "Let them come." Sylvie blinked. My lord, intercept them. If they resist, eliminate them on sight. Keep two alive. I have questions. Then I turned to Li Jinshu and switched to Chinese. Your pursuers. I'll handle them. Her eyes widened. A long pause. Then, very quietly, thank you, my lord. Her pronunciation was careful and formal. I understood perfectly. I smiled and waved Sylvie out. That night, my Iron Guard ambushed 20 Zhou soldiers in the eastern forest valley with crossbow volleys and the new black powder grenades. These guys were clearly elite fighters. Excellent swordsmanship, fast reflexes. Didn't matter. Against massed ranged fire and explosions, martial arts skills are just a fancy way to die tired. 16 killed. 2 captured with serious wounds. 2 escaped into the mountains under cover of darkness. When Sylvie reported the numbers, I said 4 words. Remember those 2 faces, because I knew exactly what those 2 survivors would do. They'd crawl back over the mountains and tell someone in the Zhou dynasty about a place called Ashwood. A place with metal tubes that spit fire and iron balls that explode. An enemy across an impassable mountain range is a problem for later. An enemy I don't know about is a problem for now. Better to let them carry the message. Don't come here unless you want to die. I looked out my window toward the eastern mountains, invisible in the darkness. Welcome to the new era, princess, I murmured in Chinese, then blew out the lamp and went to bed. Tomorrow's to-do list. Test plant rice, hire a language tutor for the princess, design drainage for the new residential district, interrogate 2 prisoners from another civilization, and somehow find time to eat breakfast. Ashwood Spring was just getting started, and I was finally going to eat rice again. Everything else was just details. I had Aiden set them up in one of the brick duplexes near the manor. 2 stories, red tile roof, glass windows, running water, central heating. Nothing fancy by Ashwood standards, just a regular civilian apartment. But watching Li Jinshu walk through that door was like watching someone enter a spaceship for the first time while pretending they're not impressed. She touched the walls, felt the warmth radiating from the brick fireplace through the plaster, registered that the entire building was dry and heated without saying a word. Her handmaid, Yuan, was less subtle. Poor girl looked like she'd walked into paradise after 10 days of mountain caves and frozen sleeping bags. The bodyguard, Han Yong, palace guard officer, tough as old boots, basically collapsed onto the bed and exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for a week. His leg wound had reopened during the journey and the bandages were turning black. Not great. I'd already sent Cecilia ahead with a medical kit. I taught her exactly 1 sentence in the Eastern language. On the spot, my name is Cecilia. I'm from the Ashwood Medical Center. Took her about 15 attempts to pronounce it. Worth it for the diplomatic points. Li Jinshu opened the door, heard Cecilia butcher her native language in the most adorable Western accent possible, and blinked in surprise. You speak Central Plains language? Only that 1 sentence. The Lord taught me. Cecilia smiled apologetically, then pointed at the wounded guy and mimed, let me fix him. What happened next would have been fun to watch. Cecilia examined the wound, frowned at the infection, then just held her palm over it and turned on the holy light. Han Yong went rigid, then slowly melted into the bed as the torn flesh knitted together. The blackened blood receded, and the pain vanished. A wound that would have taken weeks to heal was reduced to a red scar in minutes. Now here's the interesting part. According to Cecilia's report, Li Jinshu didn't freak out, didn't gasp, didn't fall to her knees screaming about miracles. She watched the entire magical healing process with calm, analytical eyes and simply said, "Thank you very much." Cecilia was actually disappointed. She'd expected the dramatic reaction. Instead, she got a polite nod from a 17-year-old who apparently treats glowing healing magic with the same energy as receiving a restaurant check. Meanwhile, A Yuan and Han Yong were having a theological debate in the background. A Yuan thought it was like Taoist talisman water healing. Han Yong said no paper talismans, no cinnabar, no chanting. More like Buddhist master energy healing. Li Jinshu sat by the fireplace and said nothing, just observed. Dinner arrived. A big clay plate of thick white bread. A bowl of hearty stew with potato, carrot, and actual chunks of salted meat, plus a jug of warm goat milk. Simple food. Not royal cuisine, but hot, filling, and real. A Yuan dunked bread in the stew, took one bite, and her eyes lit up like lanterns. "Your Highness, it's good. There's actual meat flavor. Not that watery nothing soup." Li Jinshu drank the stew slowly. I'm told she paused after the first sip and just held the bowl for a moment. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had hot food. After dinner, and this is the part that made me grin when I heard about it, Li Jinshu found the water tap. She crouched down, grabbed the brass handle, turned it experimentally. Clean, warm water poured out. A Yuan rushed over, cupped her hands under the stream, and shrieked, "Your Highness, this water is clean. You can drink it without boiling." But Li Jinshu wasn't excited. She was calculating. Because apparently, and I learned this later, the Zhou dynasty capital does have running water, but only in the imperial palace grounds and a few royal mansions. It's considered an extreme luxury, built by master engineers during the dynasty's founding era, using bamboo pipes to channel mountain spring water from the western hills. And here was a frontier town on the wrong side of an impassable mountain range, where every single ordinary house had clean piped water. She understood what that meant instantly. Underground pipe networks more extensive than the imperial palace system. Someone who planned this city from scratch with water supply as a basic requirement for every citizen, not just royalty. She stood at the window as night fell. The street lamps came on one by one, glass-covered oil lamps casting connected ribbons of warm orange light along the stone roads. No night watchmen banging gongs. No curfew announcements. No patrol soldiers marching past. Just a quiet, well-lit town that wasn't afraid of the dark. She stood there for a long time. Behind her, A Yuan had passed out on a grass mat by the fireplace, breathing softly. The poor girl probably fell asleep mid-thought. Li Jinshu lay down on the bed. Clean rough linen sheets, sun-dried, smelling like fresh air. She stared at the ceiling. According to what she told me weeks later, her thoughts that night went something like this. This Lord, Lorian Wisteria. He speaks my language. He recognized the value of rice seeds immediately, and he destroyed Zhao's 20 elite pursuers like they were insects, without even getting out of his chair. What kind of person is he? She closed her eyes. And for the first time in 3 months, fleeing assassination, crossing death mountains, starving, freezing, watching companions die, Princess Li Jinshu of the Great Zhou dynasty slept peacefully. In My town, in My guest house, with My hot water and My street lights keeping the darkness away. I didn't know it yet, but I'd just acquired something potentially more valuable than dwarf craftsmen or navigation compasses. A princess from an advanced Eastern civilization, carrying elite-grade rice seeds and a brain trained in imperial statecraft. Also someone who could eventually teach me how to cook proper rice. Priorities, people. Priorities. I slept great knowing 20 hostile soldiers had been reduced to 16 corpses and 2 prisoners. Morning productivity starts with a clean conscience and a solved problem. I had Aiden invite the princess to meet me at the livestock district. Not the most glamorous first date. First diplomatic meeting, but I wanted to see how she handled the less pretty parts of running a territory. Anyone can be impressed by running water and street lights. Show me how you react to a pig pen, and I'll know what kind of person you are. She showed up looking remarkably put together for someone who'd been half dead yesterday. Hair tidied, posture straight, eyes already scanning everything like a human surveillance camera. This girl doesn't stop analyzing. Ever. How did you sleep, princess? Very well, Lord Lorien. It was quiet, Understatement of the century. She'd been sleeping in mountain caves for 10 days. I walked her through the livestock zone. Chicken coops, duck pens, pig wallows, cattle stalls, the whole smelly tour. Dozens of separate enclosures spread across the hillside. Not pretty, not glamorous, but organized. Every animal had clean water, proper drainage, and dedicated waste collection channels. Manure gets composted and sent to the fields. Nothing wasted, nothing contaminating the water supply. I stopped at the rabbit hutches, a few dozen black and white meat rabbits munching away. These breed fast, eat grass, ready for slaughter in 2 months. Can't scale them up enough yet, though. I tossed some alfalfa into the pen and watched them swarm it like furry little piranhas. Then Li Jinshu did something that caught my attention. She offered a suggestion. In the Central Plains, pig farmers spread dry soil and wood ash on the pen floors, replacing it regularly. It reduces disease. I saw it work on farms outside the capital. Now, I already knew this. Wood ash absorbs moisture and inhibits bacterial growth. Basic animal husbandry from my previous life's knowledge. But here's the thing. She didn't know that I knew. She was testing me, offering a small piece of knowledge to see how I'd respond, gauge my expertise, measure whether I was someone worth investing her intelligence in. Smart girl. Very smart girl. I kept my face neutral. Not a bad idea. I'll have them tested in a few pens. Wood ash does work for moisture control and bacteria suppression. Old methods are sometimes more reliable than new ones. Just enough acknowledgement to show I understood the science behind her suggestion, without revealing that I probably knew more about microbiology than anyone on this entire continent. Let her wonder. She noticed. I could see a flicker of recalculation behind those dark eyes. She'd expected me to either dismiss her or get excited and ask for more tips. I did neither. She'd have to try harder to figure me out. Good. Keep her curious. We moved on to the agricultural district. Cleaner paths, irrigation channels gurgling alongside us, water gates clicking and groaning as they regulated flow. I pulled a weed from the path out of habit, a gesture so automatic that I didn't even think about it, until I noticed her watching my hands. I hear your Central Plains farming follows seasonal calendars and soil conditions, I asked casually. She lit up. Not visibly. She's too controlled for that. But her answer came faster, more detailed. Different crops need precise planting windows. Too early or too late, and the yield drops. We have agricultural manuals recording regional planting schedules. Rice is especially demanding. It needs constant water. The height of the field ridges, irrigation timing, water replacement frequency. Everything affects the harvest. She was watching my reaction carefully after this little speech. Testing again. Seeing if the barbarian frontier lord understood anything about sophisticated agriculture. I said, and kept walking. Let her marinate in uncertainty. Then we rounded a hedge and reached the test plots, and Li Jinshu stopped dead. Her rice seeds, handed over yesterday, were already sitting in wooden water basins, sprouting green shoots. We'd soaked them overnight, and the germination had already started. Before she could say anything, a clear voice called out from the field. Lorian, perfect timing. The seeds germinated fine in water, but I need you to check the temperature control for the next phase. Alara, my half-elf agricultural specialist. Silver hair, snow-white skin, slightly pointed ears, wearing a green apron with her sleeves rolled up, holding a wet grain stalk. Looking like she'd stepped out of an oil painting and into a vegetable garden. She walked over, glanced at Li Jinshu, then looked at me with a tiny smile that contained approximately 17 layers of subtext. So this is the Eastern princess you told me about yesterday. Her tone was perfectly polite. Warm, even. But I know Alara. And I noticed that her gaze lingered on Li Jinshu approximately 1.5 seconds longer than it would on a normal stranger. Li Jinshu noticed too. Because of course she did. This girl notices everything. Great. Wonderful. I'm standing in a field between a perceptive fugitive princess and a half-elf botanist who's doing that thing where women communicate entire conversations through eye contact duration. I suddenly wished I was back at the pig pens. At least the pigs were straightforward about their feelings. I introduced the two women and stepped back to watch the fireworks. Or rather, the very polite, professionally veiled fireworks. Princess brought some seeds from the east. You're in charge of agriculture. Talk. Alara glanced at Li Jinshu exactly one more time than necessary, then got straight to business. She'd already soaked the rice overnight, confirmed good water absorption, and noticed the grain quality was superior to our local dry rice variety. Not bad for someone who'd never seen this crop before yesterday. The kernels are plumper, the husks are pale yellow, clearly a better cultivar. But I need to understand the original growing conditions before I commit to anything. Li Jinshu's eyes sharpened. She'd clearly expected some country bumpkin farmer, not a silver-haired half-elf who could evaluate seed quality at a glance. She crouched by the water basin and picked up a swelling grain with her fingertips. This variety is called green sprout. It grows in flooded paddies. 30 days from sowing to transplant, with water kept 1 finger deep the whole time. When the seedlings reach half a foot, transplant them into prepared paddies spaced 1 foot apart. Water level rises gradually with growth, then drops after the grain heads form. Alara listened intently, processing, cross-referencing against local conditions in real time. Then she fired back. Your water temperature requirements might not be met here. Our spring is colder than your central plains. Slow germination, weak seedlings. Li Jinshu answered without hesitation. Cover the seedbeds with straw mats. Remove them during the day for air, cover at night for warmth. Farms near the capital use this method. Germination rate above 90% as long as there's no frost. Alara's eyes flickered with what I can only describe as reluctant respect. She dipped her fingers in the basin water, doing that half-elf nature-sensing thing, and nodded. Temperature's fine for now. I'll have straw mats prepared for nighttime. She stood up, looked at the princess, and said in a tone that was exactly 2 degrees warmer than before. You do know your rice. Progress. They went from subtle territorial sizing up to grudging mutual acknowledgement in under 5 minutes. A new record for my territory. Then I laid out the management structure, and things got spicy again. 3 acres by the river, southeast section. Irrigation is ready. I'll have the ridges reinforced this afternoon. Princess provides technical guidance and planting expertise. Alara handles execution, worker assignments, water management, fertilizer. Report issues through Sylvie. Translation: the princess advises, Alara decides. Knowledge goes in through Li Jinshu. Authority stays with Alara. Li Jinshu caught it instantly. A tiny flash of disappointment behind those polite eyes. She wanted more control. She nodded anyway. Yes, Lord Lorien. Then Alara, ever so casually, lobbed a grenade into the conversation. Lorien, one question. These seeds are rare and irreplaceable. If I follow the princess's advice and something goes wrong because she doesn't fully understand local conditions yet, whose responsibility is it? Polite words. Sharp edges. Translation: if the new girl's suggestions ruin our only batch of miracle seeds, I don't want that on my record. Li Jinshu heard every layer of that. Her expression didn't change. Mine didn't either. You two cooperate, I said. Princess provides experience, you adjust for local reality. If it fails, blame me. If it works, credit goes to both of you. End of discussion, flat. Final. No room for argument. Alara did a tiny lip purse thing, her version of accepting defeat with dignity, and pivoted to being professional again. Princess, when you're free, I'll show you the irrigation layout so you can familiarize yourself with the field conditions. That would be appreciated. Thank you. Li Jinshu's reply was warm and measured. 2 women agreeing to cooperate, while silently establishing exactly where the boundary lines are. I've seen trade negotiations with less subtext. We walked to the actual plot. 3 acres of dark, moist soil that grew beans last year. Irrigation channels freshly cleared. I pointed it out, and Li Jinshu immediately crouched down, grabbed a handful of dirt, crumbled it between her fingers, walked the perimeter, checked the topography, then came back with specific instructions. The ridges need to be at least 1 brick height taller to hold enough water. And the inlet and outlet must be on diagonal corners. If they're on the same side, the far end becomes stagnant water. Stagnant water breeds pests. Diagonal water flow for circulation. Not something an amateur would think of. I turned to my agricultural clerk without hesitation. Write it down. Do what the princess says. Li Jinshu's shoulders relaxed about 2 millimeters. She'd needed that. A clear signal that I respect expertise when I hear it. Alara watched the whole exchange, eyes moving between the princess and me like she was tracking a tennis match. Then she looked down at the rice stalk in her hand and said nothing. We spent another hour at the field edge, irrigation timing, base fertilizer ratios, how much would ash per acre, when to apply the first supplemental fertilizer after transplanting, whether water levels should track seedling height. Li Jinshu answered everything thoroughly. Alara contributed local adjustments. The two of them were actually building a workable hybrid plan. Near noon, I dusted mud off my clothes and wrapped up. Told Alara the worker orders would come through Barl this afternoon. Told Li Jinshu to ask Aiden for anything she needed at her residence. Then, as she was turning to leave, I dropped one more thing. By the way, the town night school is starting a basic accounting class in a couple days. If you're interested, it might help you work more effectively in the territory. She blinked, paused, then nodded. Thank you for the suggestion, Lord Lorien. Translation of my suggestion. You're welcome here, but you'll need to earn your place. Learn our systems. Integrate. Don't just be a princess. Be useful. Translation of her nod. Challenge accepted. I walked back to the manor feeling cautiously optimistic. I now had a Zhou princess as an agricultural consultant, a half-elf botanist doing competitive territory guarding, and 3 acres of potentially revolutionary rice paddies about to exist for the first time on this continent. Also 2 women who are going to spend the next few months being exquisitely polite to each other while conducting what I can only describe as a Cold War fought entirely through eye contact, duration, and tone of voice. I should probably warn Sylvie. Actually, no. Sylvie will figure it out on her own. She always does. After the field trip, I sent Li Jinshu a little booklet, our standard issue Ashwood measurement and currency guide. Weights, coins, basic multiplication tables. Thrilling bedtime reading. But here's what impressed me. By sunset, she'd already memorized the entire copper-to-silver exchange rate system. This girl treats knowledge like oxygen. Can't stop inhaling it. She also went and checked on her bodyguard Han Yong at the medical center. The medic said he'd be walking in 2 days, but no running or jumping for 2 weeks. She immediately started planning bone broth logistics. Practical woman. I appreciate that. On her way back, she stopped to watch our ration supply distribution, salted fish and coarse salt, 2 pounds per household, organized queue, name check system. I saw her standing there studying it like a military strategist examining enemy formations. She was mentally dissecting our resource management system through a fish line. That evening, I did something I almost never do. I went to visit her, personally, at night. Before anyone gets ideas, I brought honey. A jar of fresh honey from this year's harvest. That's it. Diplomatic honey delivery. Very professional. A Yuan opened the door and nearly had a heart attack seeing the Lord himself standing there in a linen shirt carrying a clay pot. Li Jinshu was sitting by the fireplace studying my booklet, making notes on a piece of old silk she'd brought from Zhou. Already cross-referencing and organizing. This woman studies like she's preparing for the imperial examinations of accounting. Looking at the conversion tables, I asked, sitting down. Yes, your currency system is different from ours. I want to memorize it quickly so I don't make errors in bookkeeping. Then she went for it. The question she'd been chewing on all day. Lord Lorien, may I ask something blunt? You suggested I take the accounting class. Is that because you don't think I belong in the agricultural department? There it is. The real question, am I being sidelined? I leaned back and took a moment before answering. Because this mattered. How I framed this would determine whether she became a resentful guest or a valuable team member. It's not that you don't belong there. Your performance today proved you genuinely understand rice cultivation. Your suggestions were practical and useful. Pause for effect. But I'm sending you to learn accounting because my territory doesn't lack people who can farm. It lacks people who can count. I laid out the numbers. 110,000 residents. Daily food consumption, tool depreciation, wage distribution, tax data. All flowing through a financial department that's chronically understaffed and mostly composed of people who were semi-illiterate 6 months ago. One misplaced decimal point costs more than an entire acre of failed rice. That's the reality. Her eyes changed. Not disappointed anymore. Recalculating. I'm not pulling you away from agriculture. I want you to learn our measurement systems first. Once you've mastered how Ashwood's numbers work, you can go into agriculture, logistics, wherever you want. And you'll be faster than everyone else because you'll understand the underlying framework. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I understand. Thank you for thinking that far ahead for me. No argument. No bruised ego. Just acceptance and adaptation. This girl is going to be terrifying once she's fully integrated. I stood up, did that fake pants dusting thing I do when I'm wrapping up a conversation, and added, Hanyang's medical bills are on the public account. Don't worry about it. Then I walked out into the night. Here's what I didn't tell her. I need her in accounting not just because we're short-staffed. I need to test her. Accounting is the nervous system of a territory. You can see everything from the numbers, food supply, military spending, trade margins, population growth. If I put a foreign princess in my accounting department and she performs well without leaking information or causing problems, then I know I can trust her with bigger things. And if she's half as smart as I think she is, she'll figure that out on her own within a week. I walked back to the manor under Ashwood street lights, thinking about rice paddies, conversion tables, and the fact that I just gave a fugitive princess from another civilization access to my territory's financial education system. Either this is the smartest personnel decision I've ever made, or I just handed a potential spy the keys to my treasury's logic. Guess we'll find out. But my gut says she's the real deal. Also, I really hope that rice grows. I need steamed white rice in my life more than I need almost anything else right now. Don't judge me. After I left Li Jinshu's place that night, I apparently gave her a small existential crisis. According to Ai Yuan, who has zero ability to keep secrets, the princess sat staring at the fireplace for a solid 5 minutes after I closed the door, thinking deep thoughts about governance philosophy. Good. That means I got through to her. 2 days later, I sent over the goods: a brass abacus, custom-made, ironwood frame, copper rods, smooth beads that click together like tiny mechanical kisses. Our craftsman made it. Not as fancy as whatever she used in the Zhou Imperial Academy, but functional and sturdy. Also a practice workbook full of math problems so basic they'd make a 10-year-old yawn. But here's the thing about Li Jinshu. She doesn't yawn at basics. She devours them. She showed up at the night school's self-study room with her abacus and booklet, got a temporary resident pass since she didn't have a citizen registration card yet, and parked herself at a desk for the entire morning. The practice problems were stuff like, Wang Er has 37 silver coins, buys 4 shovels for 28, how many left? And the textile factory made 1,200 feet of cloth at 3 coppers per foot. What's the total in silver? Baby math. She finished the entire book in one sitting. Made 2 currency conversion errors early on, caught them herself, corrected them, and moved on. No drama. No frustration. Just a princess with an abacus grinding through arithmetic like she was training for war. Which, in a way, she was. Afternoon, actual class. The night school classroom was already half full. 20 to 40-year-old working adults, rough clothes, slate boards, and chalk sticks on every desk. The teacher was Parker, bald, fat, formerly Old Barl's bookkeeping assistant, now running basic arithmetic courses. Teaching style, zero fluff. Writes 3 problems on the board, explains each one, stops whenever someone's confused, doesn't continue until everyone gets it. I like Parker. He's the kind of teacher who treats math like plumbing. Nothing glamorous, but everything breaks without it. Li Jinshu sat in the corner and absorbed everything silently. Most of it she'd already self-taught that morning, but hearing Parker explain it apparently crystallized several fuzzy concepts. The decimal system in particular, she'd never encountered it before. Took her 2 explanations to get it. 2. Most of my students need 5. After class, Parker walked over. You're the princess from over the mountain. The Lord told me you'd be coming. How's the pace? I've got it. Decimals need more practice. Tomorrow is advanced addition and subtraction. If it's too easy, finish the workbook and I'll swap in harder problems the day after. The Lord said you can move fast. There's applied accounting waiting for you after basics. She thanked him and left. Already planning her schedule. Already optimizing her learning curve. This woman operates like a human efficiency algorithm. Then came phase 2 of my integration plan. When she got home, Sylvie was waiting at her door, standing in that trademark Sylvie pose, straight back, arms crossed, holding an unsharpened wooden stick. Princess, good evening. The Lord sent me to ask if you'd like to learn some self-defense. Sylvie spoke slowly and clearly in imperial common tongue. I'd coached her on this. Keep it simple. Keep it direct. Don't scare the refugee princess with your 4th-tier Death Knight energy. This town is usually safe, but you never know when a drunk or a troublemaker shows up. Knowing how to protect yourself is better than lying on the ground waiting for rescue. Li Jinshu looked at the wooden stick, looked at Sylvie, and smiled. A small, genuine smile. The first one I'd heard about since she arrived. If Lady Sylvie is willing to teach me, I would be grateful. She understood what this was. Not just combat training. It was an invitation. In Ashwood, people don't teach you to fight unless they consider you worth protecting. A training instructor at your door means you've been tentatively accepted into the circle. Sylvie flipped the stick around and handed it over, handle first. Training ground east of the manor. After dinner tomorrow. Don't be late. I hate waiting. Then she turned and walked away without another word. Classic Sylvie. Li Jinshu stood under the street lamp holding that wooden stick, running her thumb along its smooth surface. According to what she told me much later, she was thinking about the night she fled the palace with a knife. The cliff where pursuers nearly caught her. And the moment I told her, I'll handle your pursuers, like I was ordering lunch. She went inside. Yuan saw the stick and asked what it was for. Starting tomorrow, Li Jinshu said, sitting by the fire, I'm learning some new things. Accounting in the morning. Rice consultation in the afternoon. Combat training in the evening. Language immersion all day long. In less than 72 hours, a fugitive princess from another civilization had enrolled herself in 3 concurrent educational programs and was already outpacing most of my native students. My integration plan had 3 phases. Make her useful, make her capable, make her indispensable. She was speedrunning all 3 simultaneously without me even asking. I'm starting to think that when this princess fully learns our language, our math, our systems, and our fighting style, she might become the most dangerously competent person in Ashwood who isn't me. And frankly, that's exactly what I need. Smart people are the rarest resource in any civilization, and one just literally fell out of a mountain and into my lap carrying rice seeds. The universe owes me nothing after this. We're even. Late evening. Office. Tea. Paperwork. The glamorous life of a frontier lord. I was rereading the military report on the mountain pass ambush for the second time, and one detail kept bugging me. Those 20 Zhou pursuers were tough. Not supernaturally tough. No battle aura. No magical energy signatures. Just physically absurd. My standard crossbow bolts can drop a normal adult male at 20 paces with one chest hit. Instant lights out. These guys. They took multiple bolts and kept fighting. Some of them charged another 7 or 8 steps with arrows sticking out of them like human pincushions before needing 5 simultaneous hits to the knees and shoulders to finally go down. By my calculations, their raw physical durability was equivalent to a first-tier knight, maybe brushing second-tier. Without any battle aura at all. Pure meat and bone, hardened through training alone. And according to my soldiers, these warriors had a noticeable, charging up, phase before combat, controlled breathing changes, then explosive bursts of power. Almost like internal energy circulation, chi manipulation, martial arts stuff from my previous life's kung fu movies, except apparently it's real here. If I could figure out the underlying mechanics and teach it to my Iron Guard, even a 30% physical boost would be a game changer on the battlefield. But I immediately shelved that thought. Li Jinshu just got here. Trust level, approximately 4%. Asking a refugee princess to share her civilization's martial secrets 3 days after arrival? That's how you get someone to smile politely and never tell you anything important ever again. File under. Extract later when relationship permits. Moving on. I leaned back and watched through the window as Li Jinshu walked home carrying that wooden practice stick Sylvie gave her. Tired but straight-backed. 3 days in Ashwood and she'd already plugged into agriculture, accounting, and combat training. No adjustment period. No culture shock meltdown. No, but I'm a princess, tantrums. When Alara gave her that passive-aggressive territorial challenge at the rice field, she absorbed it without a blink and pivoted smoothly. That takes serious emotional control and political survival instincts. Makes sense. She survived a palace purge and crossed a death mountain. The girl has been pressure-tested beyond anything my territory could throw at her. A princess who understands farming, can learn accounting, and is training combat with Sylvie. Not exactly a freeloader, I muttered. Old Barl shuffled in with fresh tea, caught my comment, and said in that gentle, elderly wisdom voice, "You seem quite interested." In the Eastern Princess, my lord. Not interested. She just happens to carry things I want. I ticked them off. Rice seeds, obviously. Knowledge of Eastern civilization, definitely. And if I can eventually understand the Zhou dynasty's political landscape through her, that's intelligence gold, even if I never send a single soldier over those mountains. Barl, being Barl, cut straight to the uncomfortable truth. She carries a nation's worth of grudges, my lord. She won't be content staying here forever. If you plan to use her, you'll need to address that thorn in her heart first. I know exactly what she wants, I said, blowing on my tea. She wants to borrow my power to go home and destroy the man who killed her father and stole her throne. Classic revenge arc, but I'm not throwing Ashwood's military into an unknown mountain range for someone else's dynasty drama. That conversation happens later on MY Timeline, when I understand what's on the other side and what it would cost. Barl nodded and changed the subject. The items recovered from the pursuers have been cataloged. He pulled out his little notebook. 17 items total, standard curved. Sabers, arrow bundles, dried rations, silver coins, and, the interesting stuff, a bronze military pass and a silk scroll. The pass was from the Zhou Ministry of War. Authorized the holder to requisition horses and supplies from relay stations along the route. Basically a government-issued, do-whatever-you-want card. The silk scroll was a direct kill order. No bureaucratic padding, no flowery language. Just physical description of the target, direction of escape, and a simple instruction, bring back or eliminate, stamped with a vermilion square seal. Zhao Chongxian, I read the name aloud. The prime minister who'd seized power. Efficient man, willing to execute a princess, which means the emperor is probably already dead or close to it. This guy doesn't waste time on half measures. I handed the scroll back to Barl. Keep it in a lockbox. Might be useful later. And send the sabers and the military pass to Copram's workshop. I want him to study Zhou forging techniques and make replicas. Knowing what their metallurgy looks like could be valuable. Barl bowed and left. Then I spent the next 2 hours doing the most exciting part of being a lord, paperwork. Approved the Phase 2 water system expansion budget. Signed off on the final stretch of cement road to White River. Reviewed the Ed Brothers Alchemy Lab expansion proposal. Initialed 12 other documents that I've already forgotten about. My administrative workload has increased roughly 8-fold since I first took over this frozen dumpster fire of a territory. 110,000 mouths to feed. Every road costs money. Every immigrant needs housing, registration, and a job. The bureaucratic machine never sleeps, and neither do I, apparently. Thank God the Administrative Council is actually functional now. Middle management can handle daily operations. I just review reports and sign things. It only took checks notes. Building an entire civilization from scratch to get here. But some things still need my personal attention. I pulled out the flintlock musket blueprint from my drawer. Version 6. The final version, after weeks of back and forth with Copperham. Barrel length, 1.2 meters. Caliber, 14 millimeters. Smoothbore. Improved French-style flintlock mechanism for better rain reliability. If the steam-powered deep-bore drill comes online as planned, Copperham estimates 3 to 4 finished barrels per day. Combined with stock, trigger, and spring production, we're looking at 20 completed muskets in about a month. 20 guns. Enough for an elite firing squad that, combined with a pike formation, could suppress a force 3 times its size. But I don't want 20. I want 500. 1,000. I want every adult citizen in Ashwood capable of picking up a musket and defending their home. Only when firearms reach militia-level distribution does this territory become truly unbreakable. For that I need standardized production lines, reliable gunpowder supply, a proper armory that's big, safe, and hidden, and way. More trained gunsmiths than Copram's crew of blacksmiths-turned-weapons engineers. Always comes back to people and time, I sighed, putting the blueprint away. The Zhou Princess, the Mountain Pursuers, the Eastern Civilization, the martial arts secrets, the revenge drama. All interesting, all potentially useful, but none of it changes what I need to do tomorrow morning or the morning after that. Build roads, purify water, make guns, grow food, train people, sign paperwork. Repeat. The princess and her mountain are just new scenery on a very long road.